Hello, my YouTube family, and welcome back to Crime Whispers. I know a lot of you use these videos to relax and drift off to sleep. So before we begin tonight's story, I thought it would be fun if everyone could leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from, and of course, if you're enjoying the cases I share here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's get comfortable, settle in, and let's begin story. 1 hour case tonight takes us to Kang Lang, a quiet area located in the New Territories region of Hong Kong. At the center of this story is a man named Jiang Wanlia, 28-year-old, who held a managerial position at a telecommunications company. Jiang was intelligent, well-educated, and deeply in love with his longtime girlfriend, Gua. The two had been together for 7 years, engaged for 1, and were living together in Yunong Village, North Point, Hong Kong. They had been making plans for their wedding and looking forward to building a life together. But those plans would never come to pass. One day in March of that year, Jiang left home for Kang Lang and never came back. He simply vanished. So what really happened to Jiang Wanli? On Sunday, March 6, 2016, at around noon, the Hong Kong police received a panicked call from Gua. Her voice was trembling as she explained that her fiancé had been missing for 2 days. She'd tried calling him repeatedly, but there was no answer by the evening of the first day. His phone had been switched off now, with 2 days gone and no word. She feared the worst when officers arrived at her home. Gua told them that on the morning of March 4th, Zhang had left to meet a man named Abai to collect a debt. After that meeting, he had vanished without a trace. She didn't know much about this Abai, only that he had been a business associate of Jiang's in the past. She'd never met him, never had his phone number, and never been involved in Jiang's business affairs. When police checked Jiang's phone records, they saw that his last call had been made around noon on March 4th. In the area of Huangan Road near Kang Lang. At the time, Hong Kong law didn't require mobile phone numbers to be registered to their owners, so investigators couldn't immediately confirm the caller's identity. But they strongly suspected this was the man named Abi when they dialed the number. The phone was switched off. Jiang's background made his disappearance all the more puzzling. Born in 1988 in Hong Kong, he'd been an exceptional student after high school. He attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States. It was during his college years that he met Gua. After graduating, he returned to Hong Kong and ventured into stock trading, later partnering with a friend. This same Abai to start a lending company. Their roles were clearly divided. Abai would bring in clients, and Jiang would handle operations, but the business struggled. Losses piled up. Eventually, it collapsed, leaving Abi owing Jiang around 5 million Hong Kong dollars, their friendship in ruins. After the failed venture, Jiang took a job at a telecommunications firm. In late 2015, he became engaged to Gua, and they bought an apartment together, taking on a heavy mortgage. But fate struck again. His company announced layoffs, and Jiang lost his job, now facing mounting financial pressure. He decided to confront Abi about the debt on March 4th, the day he disappeared for weeks. The case stalled. Police still didn't know who Abi really was, or where to find him then. On March 29th, a man named Atten walked into a police station with information that would change everything. Gaetang explained that he was an old acquaintance of Abi. They'd done business together in the past. He revealed that Abi's real name was Zhang Shengshan, a 26-year-old. According to Atten, shortly after Giang's disappearance, Abi had called him from overseas, saying he'd fled to Taiwan and wouldn't be returning to Hong Kong anytime soon because he had killed someone. He told Aten that he needed to wait for things to calm down before coming back. Bai wasn't alone. 3 friends had traveled with him to Taiwan. A 21-year-old named AA, a 23-year-old named Agui, and an 18-year-old named Zizhou. All were close to Abai, and they often lived together at first. Ateng thought Abi might be making it up after all. He had a reputation for exaggeration, but as the days went on, Abai kept bringing it up, and Aten began to fear it was true. Eventually, He decided to go to the police acting on his information. Officers went to the address at and provided the location was the basement of the Don 6 building on Wan Shai Road. Coincidentally, this was the same area where Jiang's last phone call had been traced. The name Dan 6 carried its own odd meaning. Dan meant day and night, and the number referred to the building's designation. Officially, it was meant for office use, but parts of it had been illegally converted into residential units. Abay's apartment was in the basement. When police arrived around 4 p.m., the hallway was silent. A faint, unpleasant odor seeped from behind the door. They knocked. No answer. Officers headed to the building's security office to review surveillance footage. What they saw was distinct. March 4th, the day of the disappearance, 1 a.m., along with Awu and AA, were seen returning to the apartment. 7 a.m., Abei and Awu left briefly. Returning a short while later, Abei was carrying ropes and duct tape. Awu had a plastic bottle. 12 p.m. Jiang arrived at the apartment. After that, no sign of him leaving. 3 p.m., Awu and AO were caught repeatedly going in and out of the elevator, looking visibly anxious. March 5th, 5:57 a.m., AA left the apartment. 9:36 a.m., Abai and Agwe returned with several bags of cement. 6th, 5:04 a.m., Abi and Agui were seen at the elevator, measuring its width and height with their hands, as though checking if something would fit. March 7th, 9 a.m., Abi went out alone, returning with a set of hydraulic jacks. March 8th, 11 a.m., AA returned to the apartment. 8:49 p.m., the three men were seen on camera, struggling to push a large wooden crate toward the elevator. It was bulky, heavy, and awkwardly sized. They tried again and again to make it fit, but the box was simply too big. 8:55 p.m., after 3 minutes of failed attempts, they wheeled the crate back out of the elevator and disappeared from view. They tried once more to fit the heavy crate into the elevator. This time, the elevator alarm sounded. Startled, they quickly wheeled it back toward the apartment. At 10:07 p.m., Abi was seen standing alone at the elevator doors, peering inside for a few moments before returning to the basement unit. In March 9th, Abi and Agui were captured by the cameras making several trips in and out of the elevator, sometimes carrying suitcases. Then, at 9 a.m. on March 10th, all three men left the apartment and never returned. The footage also revealed something else. Before the crime, a woman had been seen entering and leaving the apartment multiple times. Investigators believed this was Xiao Zhou, the only female among the 4 suspects. Police would later learn that all of them had left Hong Kong together on March 10th, fleeing to Taiwan outside Abei's apartment. Officers obtained a spare key from building management. The moment they stepped inside, a sharp, icy coldness hit them. Every air conditioner in the apartment was set to the lowest temperature, and then they saw it. In the center of the living room sat a large wooden crate, draped with a worn, heavy blanket. A dark liquid oozed slowly from the cracks, pooling on the floor. The air reeked of perfume and air freshener, but neither could mask the underlying stench that clung to the room. It was suffocating. The officers recognized the crate instantly. It was the same one from the surveillance footage. Pulling back the blanket revealed a solid block of concrete. Its surface, scattered with mothballs. Specialized equipment was brought in. The wooden crate was dismantled, exposing the concrete block inside, measuring roughly 3 feet by 3 feet, and just over 1.5 feet high. It looked like a coffin made of cement. While the fire department began cutting into it, police searched the apartment further. They uncovered several documents, and what they read was chilling. The papers detailed an international criminal organization known simply as TH. Group had operations across the globe. Bei was one of its leaders. Agui, Awu, and Xiao Zhou were also members. TH was involved in drug trafficking, forged documents, and contract killings. Among the lists of targets found was Zhang Wanli's name. It took over 5 hours for the fire department to breach this cement. Finally, at 1 a.m., the body inside was revealed. The victim wore a white shirt and black trousers, exactly what Jiang had been wearing when he disappeared. His head was covered with a white pillowcase. Wrapped in a plastic bag and secured with duct tape, a thick rope was wound tightly around his neck. His body was positioned face down, knees bent beneath him, hands drawn up toward his chest when the pillowcase was removed. Officers saw that his face had decomposed to the point of being unrecognizable. The autopsy revealed multiple bone fractures, puncture marks on the inner thighs and ankles, and traces of alcohol, chloroform, and other chemicals in his system. Chloroform, a colorless liquid with a distinctive odorese, often used in industrial and medical settings. The pathologist estimated time of death between March 4th and 5th, 2016. The most likely cause was chloroform poisoning, though strangulation could not be ruled out when Gua was called to the scene. She identified him by his clothing. DNA testing confirmed this was Jiang Wanli with the victim identified. Police now had 4 main suspects, but all had already crossed into Taiwan, vanishing without a trace for weeks. The case went cold. The press quickly seized on the story, and public interest surged soon. Details about Xiao Zhou began to circulate. Claims that she lived a wild lifestyle, often seen in nightlife districts with different men. Then came an unexpected break at 7:40 p.m. On April 10, 2016, Xiao Zhou walked into a police station in New Taipei City, Taiwan, hand in hand with her boyfriend Anne. They were there to surrender inside the station. Xiao Zhou began talking. She claimed she had witnessed the entire killing of Jiang Wanli in Hong Kong a year earlier. She explained she had been working as a waitress at a Japanese-themed maid cafe. Hebei had been a regular customer, appearing wealthy, generous, and unconcerned about prices. But over time, his habits changed. He started eating without paying, even sneaking into the kitchen to steal food. Eventually, the cafe's owner banned him from the premises. Even so, Xiao Zhou continued to keep in touch with him after a heated argument with her boyfriend Ian. Xia Chao left home in anger when Abe learned of her situation. He invited her to stay at his apartment, promising to help her earn good money. Trusting him, she moved in, not realizing that several of Abe's friends were also living there without intending to. Xia Chao became involved with their group. She soon replaced someone named Dao, taking on the job of recording the content of their meetings. Abe promised her a monthly salary of 8,000 Hong Kong dollars, along with free accommodation and meals at these meetings. They often discussed plans to kill people, but had never acted on them before, so Xia Chao never took the discussions seriously, mechanically recording them as instructed. That changed when the group actually carried out a murder, killing a man named Jay Young, as planned. Afterwards, they pressured Xia Chao to flee with them. She initially refused, believing she hadn't participated in the crime. But Abby called and threatened to frame her if she stayed behind. Feeling trapped and vulnerable, she reluctantly agreed. When they arrived in Taiwan, Abby confiscated her passport and ID using fake documents. The group rented a room at a hot spring hotel, altered their tattoos, changed their hairstyles, and adjusted their clothing to avoid recognition. They later moved to several different hotels before settling in New Taipei City on a friend's recommendation. As funds were running low, life became grim with no income. They survived in a cramped room, eating nothing but instant noodles. One day, Xia Chao overheard Abai and the others whispering. To her horror, she realized they were planning to sell her to human traffickers for cash. Terrified, she secretly called her boyfriend Ian in Hong Kong for help. He told her to remain calm and avoid raising suspicion, then immediately booked a flight to Taiwan while the others slept. Xia Chao slipped out to meet him, and together they went to the police. The New Taipei police quickly contacted Hong Kong authorities. On April 11th, Xia Chao and Ian were deported to Hong Kong, where she was arrested as an accomplice to murder. Based on her statement, police were able to locate the 3 remaining suspects, since they hadn't committed any crimes on Taiwanese soil. The Taiwanese police could only arrest them once their visas expired. On the morning of April 12th, police raided their room and arrested all three on charges of endangering public safety inside. They found numerous books on criminal psychology, all belonging to ABI, who carried them everywhere, suggesting a calculated understanding of manipulation that evening. The suspects were deported to Hong Kong during interrogation. Each suspect gave conflicting accounts, blaming the others. AB claimed that AA was the mastermind who pressured him into joining. He said AA had previously discussed robbing wealthy people, and Jiang's name came up because of his money. ABA initially had no intention of going through with it, but AA persisted resentful over past business dealings with Jiang that had cost him money. AB eventually agreed, though he insisted he never intended to kill AA. Later persuaded a Jew to join as well. Their first plan was to lure Jiang to a bar and drug him, but AA decided it was too risky, choosing instead to use their apartment. A instructed A and a GU to buy ropes, duct tape, chloroform, alcohol, and other supplies. He even tested the chloroform on ABI and A by forcing them to inhale it on the day of the murder. ABI called Jiang and lured him to the apartment. Believing AA wouldn't actually go through with it, he went upstairs to rest next to Shia Chow until he heard a struggle below down. He saw AA and a wrestling with Jiang. AA pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth to Jiang's mouth while A held his legs, though Jiang fought back. He was quickly overpowered. AA ordered Abai to inject alcohol into Jiang. Terrified and under threat, Abai obeyed Jiang. Soon lost consciousness, realizing they had gone too far. A Jew attempted CPR, but it was too late. AA then searched Jiang's body and took his possessions. ABI wanted to go to the police, but AA and a Jew threatened to kill him if he spoke. AA even bragged about having a contact inside the police force. They moved Jiang's body to the bathroom and discussed disposal methods. AA suggested dismemberment, but Abe refused. They decided instead to encase the body in a concrete block disguised as a flower planter, because AA had to travel to Singapore for a street dance competition. The job was left to Abe and AA after buying cement. They began their grim task, but when they tried to move the concrete block to the elevator, they discovered it was too large to fit. Neither of them could figure out what to do next. 3 days later, AA returned from Singapore when he saw the massive concrete block still sitting in place. He flew into a rage. The group made another attempt to fit it into the elevator, but again, it was too large. Frustrated, AA ordered Abe and Agu to buy a drill and several suitcases, planning to break the block apart, then pack the pieces for disposal. They hadn't considered how hard the concrete would be. Ordinary tools barely scratched the surface. As days passed, a foul stench began to seep from the block, spreading through the building. Realizing they couldn't keep it hidden much longer, AA decided to flee before leaving. He called Zhao Sha and threatened her into joining them later. Abe told police that after arriving in Taiwan, he had tried to surrender several times, but Zhao Sha acted before he could. He insisted she had no involvement in the murder. Yet AA was determined to bring her with them. When questioned about the organization, Abe admitted it wasn't real. No secret ranks, no operations, just a social media chat group with an intimidating name. A's testimony painted a different picture. He told investigators he had been passionate about dancing since childhood, appearing on shows like Asian Wave and Million Star, chasing a dream of turning professional, but he'd never found his big break until he met Abai. According to AA, Abai promised to invest in his career and help him become famous. Believing him, AA moved into the apartment where the crime would later take place in 2015. ABA assured him he didn't need to worry about money, just focus on dance at first. AA thought he'd found a benefactor, but soon he realized ABA was a fraud. The promised funding never materialized. Instead, Abai persuaded AA to take out a 50,000 Hong Kong dollars bank loan for investment. In the end, Abai handed over only 2,000 Hong Kong dollars, keeping the rest for himself. Eventually, AA also joined the so-called organization. AA testified that the plan to kill Zhang Wanli came from Abai. He claimed Obai told him Jiang was wealthy and had an unlimited credit card. With that, they would never have to worry about money again, allowing AA to fully commit to his dancing career. But by then, AA said, he had already seen through Abe's lies and wasn't tempted on the night of the murder. AA said he was sleeping in the downstairs bedroom when Abby woke him, handing him a chloroform-soaked cloth and telling him to inhale, still groggy. AA complied and quickly lost consciousness again around noon. He awoke to shouting in the living room when he stepped out. He saw Jiang struggling with Agu by that point. Abai and Agu had already forced Jiang to the floor. Agu pressed the chloroform cloth over Jiang's face while Abai injected his leg with a syringe moments later. Jiang went limp. Abai searched Jiang's belongings and took everything of value before suggesting they encase the body in concrete. The others agreed. The next day, AA flew to Singapore for a dance competition. When he returned, the concrete block had already been cast, but it was far too big for the elevator with no way to move it. They decided to run a bait, then called Xiao Sha, threatening her into fleeing with them. When police questioned Dagu, he said he had been raised by his mother after his parents divorced, and his greatest ambition was to give them a better life. He once dreamed of joining the police force, but after failing the entrance exam, he took a low-paying job with the subway company. Dagu met Abe at a Halloween party in Lan Kwai Fong and was immediately drawn to him. He soon learned Abe claimed to be linked to a powerful secret organization, a connection Agu believed could change his life to prove himself. Agu followed Abai's every instruction over time. Abai filled his mind with warped ideas, eventually convincing him to move into the apartment. Agu recalled one incident during a work trip with Abai and AA. At their hotel, Abby suddenly became serious, telling them he had a secret mission from the organization and needed to attend an urgent online meeting. No one was allowed to enter his room during that time, he warned, or they would face severe consequences. Only Aby went inside, while A stood guard outside the door. The performance convinced Agu completely. He believed the organization was real and placed his full trust in Aby. Agu told police he had no idea about Jiang's murder beforehand. On the day it happened, he said he was in the downstairs bedroom studying the organization's training materials when he heard a commotion in the living room. Rushing out, he saw AA standing behind Jiang, covering Jiang's mouth and nose with a cloth. How quickly overpowered him. Despite Jiang's desperate struggle, within moments, Jiang collapsed to the floor. At that point, Abby stepped forward and injected something into Jiang's Lego, who had witnessed the entire scene. Was so terrified that his hands and legs began to shake, believing he had just seen a murder. He rushed over and attempted CPR, but it was already too late. Panicked and unsure what to do, O followed Abi and Hao's lead in disposing of the body soon after. He fled with them to Taiwan. Throughout the escape, O lived in constant fear that the police were closing in. Abi kept pressing him to turn himself in, promising that if he confessed fully, she would take care of his mother. When the interrogation ended, police found inconsistencies in their testimonies, but one fact was clear. The international crime syndicate ABI had spoken of never existed. It was a complete fabrication, designed to manipulate and control those around her. All three suspects insisted that Xiao was not involved, making her testimony all the more critical. The prosecution named her their key witness and warned that if she lied or withheld the truth, she would be charged herself. Xiao agreed to testify honestly. Police took the suspects to reconstruct the crime scene, first to the apartment at Dan 6 where the murder occurred, then to the hardware store where they purchased the tools. Public interest was intense. Crowds of reporters and curious onlookers packed the streets. 3 years later, the trial began at the Hong Kong High Court. ABIO and Hao were charged with murder. Xiao, as the key witness, was called to testify. She described how she had been living with the three defendants at the time. Every few days, Abi would call meetings, always talking about criminal activities. She claimed to be the leader of an organization, providing the group's lodging and expenses. O and How mainly handled menial work, while Xiao managed paperwork. She had never had a romantic relationship with any of them and considered them only friends according to Xiao. The conversations had always been just talk, until the day the plan to kill Zhang emerged. ABU claimed it was an assignment from her superiors, promising a reward of 30 million Hong Kong dollars. Oh, and Hao appeared to believe her and were eager to take part. Xiao assumed it was another empty boast and jokingly said that if they succeeded, they should give her a share soon after. Abino returned with tools. Abe soaked a cloth with chloroform. Having everyone smell it, he even soaked a pair of underwear in chloroform and hid it in the downstairs bathroom as a backup on the morning of the murder. Around 9 a.m., Xiao returned to find the men huddled around a computer. Looking at maps, they said they were searching for a body disposal site, and asked if she knew of a secluded place. She mentioned Lono Island, as she was planning a trip there with her boyfriend the next day by noon. Xiao was upstairs napping when she heard an argument below. As she started down the stairs, Abby rushed up, stashing alcohol in a syringe in a closet. He told her not to go down, warning that she would see things she shouldn't. Moments later, she heard a scream. Xiao knew then that the killing had taken place, too frightened to intervene. She stayed upstairs until curiosity got the better of her. When she finally peeked down, Zhang was gone. The men had already moved his body to the bathroom. Abe told her not to return for several days, as they would be dealing with the remains. 6 days later, Abe called and ordered her to flee with them to Taiwan. She refused at first, but when he threatened to frame her for the murder, she reluctantly agreed. After a lengthy trial, the court delivered its verdict. Abe, real name Sang Xingshun, was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Oh, real name Chang Shunheng and Hao, real name Lo Shou, were acquitted of murder but convicted of manslaughter, each receiving 17-year sentences because of her cooperation and truthful testimony. Xiao was spared prosecution. The prosecution ultimately decided not to pursue criminal charges against the witness, Liu Gu, also known as Zhao Shu. With that decision, the case was officially closed. Throughout the trial, Zhang's family and his fiancée, Ms. Guo, had followed every development closely. When the court delivered its verdict, they broke down in tears. Xiao Shu's boyfriend, Ayan, was also present in the courtroom. Speaking to reporters afterward, he reaffirmed his trust in her, describing her as a good person and dismissing the online rumors as false. In the days after, a video of Zhang's final phone call with his father surfaced online. It was a simple, heartfelt conversation, one that Zhang's father never knew would be their last. The clip touched thousands who watched it, a poignant reminder that while the deceased are gone, the living must carry on. Justice had been served, the perpetrators were held accountable, and yet, the void left behind remained. Story 2. Our next case became one of the biggest criminal scandals in the final months of 2023. A story that captivated South Korea and revealed the exploits of someone many would soon call a master manipulator. It began when former South Korean fencer Nam Hyun-ai, age 42, shocked the public by announcing her divorce from her husband, professional cyclist Gong Hyosuke. After 12 years of marriage and a daughter together, Nam was an Olympic athlete, beloved for her grace on the piste and her string of victories, medals from the Asian Games, the Olympics, and countless championships. But just 2 months later, in October, she stunned the country again. She was remarrying her new fiancé, and Chungju was 15 years her junior. She introduced him as a former equestrian athlete who had retired after an injury, now running a psychological education and performing arts center for children. Not only that, she claimed he was also the CEO of a world-renowned company and the illegitimate child of the chairman of the Paradise Hotel and Casino Group. The whirlwind romance, less than a year from first meeting to engagement, drew intense media attention, but it wasn't the age gap that had people talking. Some who saw the couple's wedding photo claimed something about him seemed off. A few even suggested he might not be a man at all soon. Social media was awash with claims contradicting Nam's account of her fiancé. Then came the bombshell. On October 25, 2023, Dispatch, one of South Korea's top online news outlets, published an investigation exposing Jae-in Chong-ju as a con artist with a criminal record and, in fact, a woman posing as a man, according to the report. She had defrauded at least 7 victims of nearly 300 million won, about $225,000, served time in prison, and repeatedly changed her identity to deceive and steal, before vanishing at first. Nam refused to believe it. She defended her fiancé online, thanking people for their concern, but insisting she had the right to pursue her own happiness. She even threatened legal action against those spreading what she called malicious lies. But when victims came forward with undeniable proof, the reality became impossible to ignore. Nam ended the engagement, cut all contact, and wanted nothing more to do with her. Unfortunately, Chung-ju didn't take no for an answer. She showed up at Nam's mother's home in the middle of the night, ringing the doorbell at 1 a.m. and knocking repeatedly. Police eventually detained her, but released her after determining she wasn't a flight risk. Instead, they imposed a restraining order, forbidding her from coming within 100 meters, roughly 328 feet of Nam, and banning all contact, including calls and text messages. To protect her, authorities issued Nam an emergency allowing her to alert police instantly if Chong-ju attempted to approach or harm her. But the ordeal wasn't over. Nam soon learned her ex-fiancé had been using her fame to con others. Several victims admitted they trusted Chong-ju because she was associated with such a well-known and respected athlete. The Paradise Group publicly denounced Chong-ju's claim of being the chairman's illegitimate child, calling it entirely false, and warning of the damage it had caused their reputation as more details emerged. A troubling pattern in Chong-ju's past began to surface, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. She had studied at a livestock and horse racing school in South Korea, and later enrolled in an advanced vocational school in Namon, but dropped out after her first year. So how did Jae-in Chung-ju manage to fake her identity and pull off such elaborate fraudulent schemes? She spun an outrageous tale about her life, carefully crafting an image of luxury and privilege. She claimed she had been born in New York and was the illegitimate daughter of the chairman of the Paradise Group, one of South Korea's wealthiest chaebol families, comparable to the Samsung Group according to her fabricated backstory. From the age of 5, her life had been nothing like that of ordinary people. Whenever she went out, even to a cafe or a restaurant, she was closely guarded by bodyguards. She boasted that she had never done housework and had been taught business skills by her parents from a very young age. To make the story more believable, she occasionally spoke with a Korean-American accent. She also claimed that, during her youth, she had been a professional equestrian athlete until an accident at age 19 forced her to end her sports career. From there, she said, she shifted to the business world, particularly the IT industry. There are videos of her speaking at conferences, presenting herself as a leader, an investment expert, and a successful entrepreneur. She frequently addressed students about investing, and her apparent deep knowledge in the field, supposedly gained from growing up in a wealthy chaebol family, helped solidify the illusion. She also claimed to own multiple thriving businesses and to have lived in some of South Korea's most expensive apartments before her crimes were exposed. She and Hyun-hee were living at the luxurious Signal residences in Lot World Tower in Jeomseol, one of Seoul's most exclusive addresses. This carefully crafted image of a young, successful, and wealthy business figure caused many people, including Hyun-hee, to fall into her trap. Their relationship quickly became a social media sensation in just a few short months. Hyun-hee frequently showed off the extravagant gifts she had received from her husband B. On Instagram, the list was staggering. $5,000 Dior handbags, fine jewelry from world-famous brands, and even a brand-new Bentley worth $250,000. Jae-in was equally flashy. driving luxury cars and taking lavish trips. One of their most talked about getaways was to Paradise City Hotel, where the room rates reached $112,000 per night. Their meet-cute story added another layer of intrigue. Hyeon-hee, a retired Olympic champion, owned her own fencing academy. One day, Jae-in walked in, saying she wanted to learn fencing from the Olympic champion, according to Hye. This was when the situation began to feel strange and almost too unbelievable, and, as later events proved, her instincts were right initially. Jae-in presented herself as a woman and sought friendship. They quickly bonded during private lessons. At the academy, within days, Jae-in began to play the role of a talented investor, pitching enticing business ideas and inviting Hyeon-hee to join her projects. It was all part of the illusion of being a wealthy, capable entrepreneur. Then, Jae-in made a shocking revelation. She told Hyeon-hee she was actually a man who had undergone gender reassignment surgery. To prove it, she even produced an ID card showing the number 1, which in South Korea designates a male, as opposed to 2 for female. Hyeon. He believed her. The story spiraled further into absurdity as the truth began to surface. The first turning point came when pre-wedding photos of Jae-in and Hyeon-hee were published. Former victims recognized Jae-in and came forward. The public was stunned that such a notorious fraudster had continued swindling people while living in a luxury high-rise, and without repaying a single won to past victims. As more people spoke up, a clearer picture of fraud techniques emerged. Notably, she had deceived both men and women for years, switching between male and female identities as needed. In one case, while posing as a woman, she convinced her boyfriend that she was pregnant. Using this lie, she borrowed thousands of dollars from his credit card and even his parents' cards, plunging the entire family into debt. She also used the boyfriend's phone to impersonate him, messaging his friends to ask for emergency loans, believing he was in trouble. They sent money. Most had never even met Jae-in in person. The boyfriend eventually learned that the woman he'd met as her mother was actually an actress Jae-in had hired. Yes, there are in fact services in South Korea where actors can be hired to play parents, relatives, or acquaintances, following a script that includes fabricated backstories for each boyfriend. Jae-in reused the pregnancy ruse, showing stolen ultrasound images from the internet as proof, and demanding housing allowances and other expenses. Her scams also extended into the investment world when infiltrating new social circles. She would present herself as a sharp investor with exclusive opportunities. Many victims, enticed by the promise of high returns, handed over their life savings or even borrowed from banks only to discover it was all a carefully staged performance. Her criminal record is extensive. In 2019 alone, she faced 7 separate lawsuits for fraud. Perhaps the peak of her audacity was when she staged a fake wedding playing the role of a man and married another woman, though the legality of this marriage remains unclear. The ceremony was grand and public. Shockingly, she pulled off this elaborate scam when she was only 22, using chest binders to appear male. She convinced the bride she was a man. Friends of the ex-wife later confirmed that two were convinced she was male. The most startling revelation came when Jae-in's ex-wife finally broke her silence and revealed that John told her first wife an outrageous story that she was transgender, had undergone a rare, extremely expensive surgical procedure available only to the wealthy, and could therefore make her pregnant incredibly. The ex-wife believed her soon after they married and moved into a luxurious apartment. John claimed, "I think you're pregnant," and handed her a pregnancy test when she took it. The result showed 2 lines, a positive. What the ex-wife didn't know was that John had bought fake pregnancy tests, novelty items designed as pranks, which always give a positive result when exposed to water or urine. It's something doctors later confirmed was biologically impossible. But John's psychological manipulation was so effective that her wife fully believed the lie. And this wasn't the first time John used that tactic. Yeon-hee, the woman who almost became John's second wife, later revealed that John had done the same thing to her. She too was given one of those fake tests and told she was pregnant, Yan admitted she believed it. Partly because John insisted she'd had some high-end surgery, only accessible to the rich Yan. He recalled that during their relationship, intimacy was rare, and, when it did happen, the lights were always off, making it impossible for her to see John's body clearly. John's deception extended far beyond her gender. She even staged coughing fits in the bathroom, pretending to cough up blood to convince Yan she had a terminal illness, all to elicit pity and deepen the emotional bond. John's entire life was staged like a movie set. Witnesses recalled that when her ex-wife got into John's car, the driver, clearly in on the act, would address her as boss and read out a fake daily schedule, making her seem like an important executive. The deception reached Hollywood levels when John wanted to impress Yan He, an Olympic athlete and celebrity. She hired fake paparazzi to burst into the restaurant where they were dining, shouting questions like, "Are you the CEO of a major corporation? Do you have a connection to the Paradise Group? Is it true you're inheriting one of the largest fortunes in South Korea?" John would pretend to refuse comment, which of course only made the illusion more believable. She even arranged VIP airport treatment, the kind usually reserved for politicians or elite athletes, further convincing Yan that she was wealthy and well-connected. John's fraud wasn't just about appearances. She also used money from victims to keep the charade alive, hiring actors, luxury cars, and staged events to maintain her false identity as the Chow family heiress. Even after serving prison sentences, including 2 years for previous fraud, she continued her scams in prison. She pretended to be pregnant to gain sympathy and privileges from fellow inmates, who only later realized they'd been duped. Again, experts who have studied her behavior believe John isn't actually transgender, but instead switches gender presentations strategically to suit her consta. Biggest question now is whether Yan He was truly a victim, or if she was involved. Some payments from victims were made directly into Yan He's account, not John's. Yan claims she had no knowledge of any fraud, and insists she only trusted the person she loved. But investigators aren't so sure, and the truth remains tangled in John Chung-ju's web of lies. And without undergoing gender reassignment surgery, she shifted the blame toward Yan He, claiming that He knew everything from the beginning and had even encouraged her to undergo breast surgery to help maintain the fabricated story. This ignited a public blame game between the two. Although Yan He firmly denied any involvement, her once celebrated image as a talented Olympic athlete was severely tarnished on October 31, 2023. Authorities officially arrested J.N. Chong-jo. According to police, J.N. was accused of embezzlement after she received 20 million won, about $155,000, from a victim under the pretense of investing in an app development project in August. Later, she allegedly pocketed over 100 million won, around $775, by claiming the funds were for an ongoing overseas project. Following a criminal complaint, investigators launched a thorough inquiry and ultimately found J.N. hiding at a relative's home in Gimpo City, Gyeonggi Province. Soon after, police also arrested a man named Lee, believed to be an accomplice, who allegedly helped facilitate the fraudulent activities. Experts say J.N.'s scheme highlights the sophistication of modern fraudsters, particularly in their ability to prey upon the vulnerabilities and trust of their victims. Her pattern of deception stretched back to her youth, suggesting deep-rooted, manipulative tendencies. The scale and complexity of her more recent crimes were consistent with someone experienced in large-scale cons. During the February 14, 2024, trial at the Eastern Seoul District Court, prosecutors demanded a sentence of up to 15 years for fraud and impersonation. However, the court sentenced her to 12 years before the final judgment. J.N. made a statement in court: "I promise to rectify the damages I have caused, even if it takes a long time, and to prove my commitment through my actions. I have and will always repent for my actions." But just 2 days later, On February 16th, the Eastern Seoul Public Prosecutor's Office announced they would appeal both Jae-eun's sentence and her accomplice Lee's 18-month prison term. They argued that, despite prior fraud convictions, Jae-eun escalated her crimes to an even larger scale, causing severe financial and emotional damage to multiple victims. They also pointed out that she squandered the stolen money on a lavish lifestyle, with no realistic way to repay the victims, demonstrating not just greed, but a complete lack of genuine remorse. The prosecutors also contested the court's view of Lee's role, while the initial trial treated him as a mere accessory. Prosecutors alleged that Lee was an active participant, providing luxury cars, high-end housing, fake credit cards, and personally managing more than $22 billion, about $165 million of the stolen funds. He allegedly siphoned off a portion of this money for himself, given the level of involvement. Prosecutors argued that Lee's actions were integral to the primary offense, not merely secondary assistance. Large-scale fraud often involves multiple individuals and well-orchestrated cooperation, and this case was no exception. It serves as a stark warning about the power of psychological manipulation, how some individuals can weave elaborate illusions that defy common sense, exploiting trust to devastating effect in today's information-driven world. Vigilance is the best defense against predators like Jae-eun, who are willing to use deception as their currency. Story 3. The next case takes us to Monroe Township, New Jersey, USA. In 2011, a story that begins as an embodiment of the American dream, but ends in tragedy, like many who left China in search of opportunity. Wang Xia and his wife Li Shanla pursued education abroad as their ticket to a better future. Both were graduates of two of China's most prestigious universities, Tsinghua University and Peking University. Their academic excellence earned them the chance to study at the University of Pennsylvania, one of America's Ivy League institutions. Upon graduation, success seemed to come naturally. Wang Xia became a skilled software engineer, working in the high-pressure world of Wall Street finance, while Li Shan built a career at a major pharmaceutical corporation, starting as an entry-level chemist. She worked relentlessly for a decade, eventually earning a senior chemist position in 2008. They reached a major milestone, purchasing their first home in the quiet, picturesque town of Monroe a year later. In January 2009, they welcomed their son, the light of their lives, to friends and neighbors. They were the picture of a prosperous, loving family, a stable home, successful careers, and a bright future ahead. But in early 2011, life took a sudden and dark turn. Shortly after New Year's, Dejia began feeling unusually fatigued. Like many, he dismissed it as the flu and visited Princeton University Medical Center for treatment, expecting a few pills would set him right. Instead, his condition worsened. He began experiencing severe nausea, vomiting, and hair loss, alarming symptoms that raised red flags for the medical staff. An observant nurse realized that something more serious might be at play and alerted the attending physician, who ordered an extensive series of tests. By January 14, Xia was admitted to the hospital for close monitoring. His health declined at an alarming rate, despite the medical team's best efforts. By January 25th, he had slipped into a deep coma. That same day, test results confirmed the unthinkable. He had been poisoned. It was too late. On January 26th, just 12 days after his hospital admission, Wang Xia died at the age of 39. The rapid descent from flu-like symptoms to death left a haunting question. Who would poison a man with such a promising life ahead, and why? From the outside, it seemed unimaginable. Wang Xia, a healthy man in his prime, had collapsed under the weight of an invisible and insidious enemy. The autopsy and toxicology results soon revealed the shocking cause: thallium poisoning. Once commonly used in rodenticides and insecticides, thallium had long been banned for household use in the United States because of its extreme toxicity and slow, stealthy effects. Its colorless, odorless nature made it almost impossible to detect in food or drink without specialized testing, and its symptoms, nausea, fatigue, hair loss, could easily be mistaken for other ailments in the early stages. The revelation instantly transformed the case from a medical mystery into a full-blown homicide investigation. Who would want Wang Xie dead, and how had such a rare poison found its way into his system? Detectives began looking at those closest to him, starting with his wife, Li Xinla. It wasn't just standard protocol. Certain details from hospital staff had caught investigators' attention. Nurses reported that while Li Xin seemed attentive on the surface, there were moments when her emotional responses felt oddly restrained. Friends and colleagues were also interviewed, and slowly, a troubling picture began to emerge. The couple's marriage, once thought to be idyllic, had been under significant strain for years. Lucian was described as ambitious and meticulous, but also cold and difficult to please. Several of Xia's co-workers recalled private conversations in which he confided about growing tension at home, financial disagreements, disputes about parenting styles, and subtle power struggles had started to erode their relationship. But perhaps most concerning for investigators was a discovery about Li Xin's personal life. She had developed a close relationship with a male co-worker at her pharmaceutical company, a relationship that colleagues hinted was more than professional. While there was no immediate proof of an affair, the implication was enough to deepen suspicion. Further digging revealed that Li Chan, through her work as a senior chemist, had knowledge of and potential access to various chemical substances, including thallium. This connection made her position in the case far more precarious in the eyes of the investigators. Opportunity and knowledge were no longer in question. Only motive remained. A breakthrough came when forensic accountants traced unusual withdrawals and credit card activity. In the months before Xia's illness, Li Xin had been spending large sums, some of which seemed unrelated to household expenses. Detectives theorized that she might have been planning for a life without her husband, one unencumbered by marital strain or shared responsibilities. In March 2011, after weeks of mounting evidence, police arrested Li Xinla and charged her with first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a dangerous substance. She maintained her innocence, claiming that she loved her husband and had no reason to harm him. Her defense team argued that there was no direct evidence linking her to the poison's administration, and that the prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial connections. The trial, which began in 2013, captivated both local residents and the Chinese-American community nationwide. The prosecution argued that the murder was deliberate, calculated, and motivated by a combination of personal dissatisfaction and financial gain. They highlighted Li Xin's scientific expertise, her alleged romantic involvement with another man, and the fact that thallium was not a substance one could accidentally stumble upon. The defense countered that the prosecution had failed to provide a clear chain of evidence showing exactly how the poison entered Xia's system. They suggested the possibility of an unknown third party, perhaps someone with a grudge or hidden agenda. After weeks of testimony, including emotional accounts from Xia's family members and damning forensic evidence, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on all counts. Li Xinla was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the friends and family of Wang Xie, the outcome brought a bittersweet sense of closure. Justice had been served, but it could never bring back the man whose life was cut short for the wider community. The case became a chilling reminder of how the most dangerous threats sometimes come from those closest to us, and how knowledge, when paired with malice, can turn into a lethal weapon. The toxin responsible for such rapid, devastating symptoms was soon revealed when the hospital reported the case to local police and the FBI. Urgent test results came back with a chilling truth. Wang Xie had been poisoned with thallium. But what exactly is thallium, and why is it so deadly? Thallium is a chemical element with a long history of industrial use. It's found in anti-corrosion materials, low-temperature thermometers, superconducting equipment, pesticides, and even depilatory agents. Its most dangerous quality Many of its compounds are completely colorless, odorless, and dissolve easily in liquid, making them nearly impossible to detect a person can ingest or inhale it without ever realizing, which is why thallium has earned a grim reputation as a poisoner's dream throughout history. It has appeared in countless shocking criminal cases, and now it had surfaced again in the tragic poisoning of Wang Xia thallium. Poisoning is rare, complex, and notoriously hard to diagnose. Symptoms are often severe, yet deceptive, including crushing headaches, muscle tremors, seizures, and in the worst cases, coma. Digestive distress is also common, nausea, vomiting, and intense abdominal pain. One distinctive clue is hair loss, which often begins several days after exposure. Skin rashes or lesions may appear. 2. But because doctors rarely encounter thallium poisoning, it's easy to misdiagnose, wasting the critical time needed to save a patient's life. There are two main types. Acute poisoning happens when a large amount enters the body over a short period, usually by intentional or accidental ingestion. Symptoms appear quickly and hit hard, targeting the nervous and digestive systems. Chronic poisoning occurs after long-term, low-level exposure, often in certain industrial workplaces, with effects building slowly over time, sometimes causing vision loss or motor impairments. In Wang Xia's case, every sign pointed to acute poisoning, and suspicion soon fell on one person, his wife, Liang Lan, a chemist at a respected American pharmaceutical company. On January 29, police arrested Liang Lan on charges of poisoning her husband with thallium. News of the talented, admired couple now shattered the image so many had admired. People asked, what could drive her to commit such a cruel act? How could she leave her 2-year-old child fatherless and destroy the life they had built together? Lan was from Beijing, a woman of striking contrasts, outwardly gentle and graceful, but inside driven by ambition, competition, and pride. At Peking University, a place where China's brightest minds gathered, she stood out not just for her height and beauty, but for her sharp intellect and academic achievements. She also found love there, beginning a relationship with a classmate named Chen Hua. Both went on to earn spots in prestigious master's programs, and their romance seemed destined to last. That was until a student dance exchange between Peking University and Tsinghua University changed everything. Wang Xia, a promising young man from Tsinghua Department of Precision Instruments, first laid eyes on Lan. During that event, for him, it was love at first sight. Without hesitation, he crossed the floor and asked her to dance. In that moment, the noise and crowd seemed to vanish. Their movements were fluid and in sync, drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. Applause filled the hall, but Lan's heart, at that time, still belonged to Chen, who most would have walked away. Wang Xia did the opposite. Her rejection only fueled his determination. He decided he would win her love, and he made it his mission. When he learned that Lan dreamed of studying abroad but faced resistance from both her family and Chen Hua, Wang saw his opening. He began visiting Peking University constantly, even enrolling in elective courses there just to be near her. He helped her with her coursework, carried her up and down stairs when she sprained her ankle, and even did her laundry. Where Chen Hua dismissed her overseas ambitions, Wang embraced them. He joined her in TOEFL prep classes, researched universities, and applied for scholarships. Alongside her, he painted vivid pictures of their life in America, top universities, brilliant careers, and a love that would last forever. Slowly, the idea took root in her mind. The promise of success, adventure, and a shared dream began to outweigh her old attachments. By late 1997, both received acceptance letters from the University of Pennsylvania. In February 1998, they boarded a plane to the United States. As they waited at the airport, Lan burst into tears, looking at him intently. She said, "I've given up my first love, left my parents, and followed you to America. You won't disappoint me, will you?" Wang Jia promised her, without hesitation. "Trust me, we will succeed, and I will love you for the rest of my life." But reality in America was far harsher than either expected. As international students, they couldn't legally work, and Money was tight there. First home was a damp basement apartment, the farthest thing from the dream. He had painted Wong refused to let hardship crush them. He worked part-time in a small Chinese restaurant, under the table, earning barely enough to cover the basics to save money. He'd eat only the free staff meals, so Lan could have more. From what little they could afford, Day's small portion of the meal would be eaten on the spot, but the rest was carefully packed so Shia could bring it home to his girlfriend. Those modest packages weren't just food, they were quiet symbols of Shia's love and silent sacrifice, gestures that deeply touched Tia's heart despite their hardships. Their love bloomed like a flower in the desert. Shia was a constant source of encouragement, painting bright visions of the life they would share. He believed their struggles were only temporary, that soon they would have a real home in America. That promise became their shared motivation, carrying them through the most difficult days in the fall of 2000. Their perseverance was rewarded. Shia and Tia graduated together from the University of Pennsylvania, stepping into stable careers with promising futures. The hard years faded into memory, replaced by optimism. Their American dreams seemed to be taking shape, but soon, small cracks began to appear in their fairy tale instead of growing closer. Tension started to build. Ti's competitive and calculating nature, once hidden during the early struggles, now began to emerge. The shift grew more obvious as Shia's busy work schedule left her feeling emotionally neglected. By September 2001, they held a simple wedding ceremony, marking the official start of their married life. 3 months later, the good news doubled. Their green card applications were approved on the day they received them. Shia embraced Tia with excitement and proposed their next step. "Let's have a child as soon as possible." But Tia's reaction was like a splash of cold water. She calmly explained that if she got pregnant now and became a full-time housewife, relying on one income, it could delay their dream of buying a house. Her refusal wasn't just practical, it revealed a sharp contrast in priorities. Shia was disappointed, but he saw the logic in her reasoning. He stayed silent, choosing not to argue. Yet this seemingly small moment revealed a growing divide in their goals and values at work. Shia faced intense competition and long hours, returning home exhausted. Gradually, he stopped doing the household chores he once handled willingly. Tia noticed and resented it. She began leaving tasks undone, waiting for him to complete them. One evening, when she asked him to do the laundry, and he said he'd do it later, her frustration boiled over. The argument escalated quickly, not because of the laundry itself, but because she saw it as a symbol of how much he had changed from the man who once indulged her every wish to someone who would now stand his ground. Her hurt turned to tears seeing this. Shia felt remorse. He apologized, promising to help more with the housework and spend more time with her, but work swallowed his time, and the promises were soon broken, leaving Ti's disappointment to deepen. The tension reached a peak during Chinese New Year in 2006. Shia announced he had to travel to Los Angeles for business on the very first day of the new year for Tia. His absence on the most important holiday of the year was unthinkable. She tried to stop him from going, and even threatened to complain directly to his superiors. The fight left lasting damage, turning an old wound into something far harder to heal. Small disputes kept surfacing, each one more severe than the last. By now, Tia's emotions had grown extreme in America. She had no close friends to confide in, and she couldn't bear to burden her aging parents with her troubles. Unable to release her frustrations, she began resenting her ex-boyfriend, Chinu. She convinced herself that if he had agreed to go abroad with her years ago, her life would be entirely different. One day, she tracked down his phone number through a classmate and called him only to unleash her anger. Chino, taken completely off guard, tried to understand what was happening, but before he could respond, Tia hung up. Even then, she wasn't satisfied. She sent him an insulting message afterward. It was clear that resentment had taken root in her heart. As the saying goes, the deeper the love, the deeper the hate. Hand in the marriage of Xia Yi and Tia, that was becoming painfully true in March 2008. The couple made what should have been a joyful decision. They purchased a $630,000 home in an upscale neighborhood in Monroe Township. Tina, with her strong-willed personality, never wanted to depend on anyone early in their marriage. She suggested splitting the cost of the house equally, half each, when it came time to decorate. From big purchases like curtains and sofas to the smallest ornaments, the couple carefully chose everything together. She, hoping to mend the cracks already forming in their marriage, deliberately slowed down his work schedule and turned down business trips. Tina, no longer young, decided to fulfill her husband's long-held wish for a child, believing it would make him focus more on their home and perhaps heal their relationship. A few months later, Tina became pregnant. She was overjoyed. He promised to work harder to support both her and their future baby, but instead of becoming more present, he took on even more work, often leaving early and returning late. Tina's pregnancy was difficult. Her age brought complications. She suffered from severe morning sickness, and depression soon set in. She often complained that she used work as an excuse to avoid her, but she endured, clinging to the hope that once the baby arrived, he would change. In January 2009, their son was born, but rather than bringing them closer, the baby only deepened their tension. Tina expected her husband to share childcare duties, while she insisted she should stay home as a full-time mother. Tina wanted to return to work just a month after giving birth. An idea she strongly rejected. Arguments erupted frequently. At first, she tolerated her accusations, but soon he began to argue back. Their fights grew so loud and frequent that neighbors called the police multiple times. By the end of that year, officers were visiting their home almost weekly to mediate disputes. Later that year, they traveled back to China to visit family. The moment they boarded the plane, another argument broke out, this time over whose family to visit first. When they landed, they each took separate taxis to their respective homes. By May 2010, another trivial family dispute led Tina to accuse she of wasting her youth and love. She, exhausted from the constant fighting, proposed divorce. Tina, though furious and unwilling to admit she wanted to stay, refused to yield, insisting on a strict, uncompromising division of assets and child support. She, equally stubborn, believed her domineering nature had destroyed the marriage and saw no reason to make concessions. Under U.S. law, they were required to live separately for a period before finalizing the divorce. Initially, they planned to sell the house, but the financial crisis had caused property prices to plummet, making it a loss. Instead, they agreed to live separately under the same roof, a tense arrangement that only fueled resentment. Not long after, she brought an American girlfriend home for the night. Tina, enraged, confronted the woman. "This is my house. Get out." She blocked her way and shouted, "This is my house. Besides, we've signed a divorce agreement. You have no right to control me." Tina cried the entire night, but she didn't stop. He continued openly dating other women, sometimes bringing them home after one girlfriend left the house in disarray. Tina pointed at she's face and spat out bitterly, "Don't be too smug. I'll make you pay dearly." She ignored her words. On January 14, 2011, the couple was scheduled to finalize their divorce in court, but that morning, she began experiencing severe symptoms, the very ones described at the start of this case. Instead of going to court, he was rushed to the hospital. It would be the last time he ever left home. In January 29, 2011, police arrested Tina, charging her with poisoning her husband with thallium. She denied everything, insisting she had no reason to harm him since their divorce agreement was already in place. But the investigation uncovered disturbing truths. Since November 2010, Tina had repeatedly obtained thallium from her workplace, claiming it was needed for research. With her background in chemistry, she knew exactly how deadly it was. Following her threat to she began secretly adding the poison to his food and drinks. Prosecutor revealed that even as she lay in his hospital bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, Tina continued to administer the poison when he slipped into a coma. She tried to buy 2 one-way plane tickets for herself and their 2-year-old son to Beijing, But payment issues stopped Hera. Representative from Bristol Myers Squibb testified that Tina had signed out for bottles of thallium, none of which were related to her assigned research project. When returned, 90% of the chemical was missing. Divorce lawyer Michael Green confirmed that on January 10, 2011, the couple had agreed on child custody, asset division, and finances, meaning their case could have been finalized on January 14th if she hadn't fallen ill initially. Tina's bail was set at $150,000, but when she was formally charged with murder, it was increased to $415 million, a sum she could never afford. She remained in custody by May 2013. After more than 2 years behind bars, the trial loomed after years of investigation. The court finally began the trial. The prosecutor presented an extensive case, using detailed calendars, charts, trial videos, and the evidence collected during Tina's arrest. Items included her handbag, small scraps of paper retrieved from the trash, notebooks, company computer search histories, and relevant legal clauses, all intended to prove that Tina had both the motive and the means to poison her husband. After careful consideration of testimony from both the prosecution and defense, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Tina was guilty of murder on September 30th. She was sentenced to life imprisonment at 44 years old. She would have to serve at least 85% of her sentence, approximately 62 years, without the possibility of parole. Tina's poisoning case left an indelible mark on public consciousness, not only for its cruelty, but also for what it revealed about the darker sides of love and marriage. Wang Zia and Tina had once been a talented couple with bright futures, only to become central figures in a tragic story, ending with the husband's death and the wife's self-destruction. Their tale serves as a stark reminder of the importance of understanding, respect, and communication in marriage. It illustrates that professional success alone cannot guarantee domestic happiness, and that unresolved conflicts, however small, can spiral into unimaginable consequences. Story 4. A high school student named Yanin and her parents were brutally murdered in their home, with only a single survivor, a man renting a room in the house. Initially, police suspected this man, but as the investigation unfolded, a shocking affair emerged as the motive behind the tragedy. The case took place in Taipei, Taiwan, along Section 5, Zhangxia East Road on the afternoon of December 12, 1995. A local plumber called his boss in a weak, panicked voice. "Boss, I've been attacked. I have 6 wounds and can't come to work. There's been a murder where I live. 3 people are dead. Please come." The boss immediately alerted the police. Officers quickly arrived at the plumber's residence, discovering a horrific crime scene on the 2nd floor. Blood covered the floors and walls, and red footprints were scattered throughout the rooms. Buttons were imprinted in the blood, suggesting the killer had stepped on clothing or furniture. While fleeing, police theorized that finding these buttons could be key evidence. The victims were identified as Yanin's family, her mother in the hallway, her father, and her sister Shanann in the master bedroom. The wounds were extreme. The mother had been stabbed 22 times, the father 9 times, and Shanann 20 times. Shanann's neck was nearly severed, indicating exceptional rage. Analysis suggested the killer had entered the house deliberately and had no interest in theft. As nothing was missing, the family appeared to have been covered with blankets or clothing after death, possibly due to superstitions common in Taiwan. Fearing the spirits of the dead might return, forensic experts determined that the same fruit, Nifa common supermarket item, had been used in all 3 murders. Neighbors reported hearing arguments around 3 a.m., which they assumed were a domestic dispute. No one called the police, allowing the killer to act without interruption. A family member, had a habit of staying up late to play mahjong on the day of the murders. She followed her usual routine, going to the market and returning around 4 p.m. The killer, displaying extreme audacity, had already killed 2 family members and remained hidden in the house for 13 hours, waiting to finish the rest. This suggested that the perpetrator either had a personal grudge or knew the family well enough to plan a complete massacre. The investigation quickly focused on narrowing down suspects, but one question haunted the police. The anonymous plumber who had called in sick after the murders. His name was Wu Zhongchen, a tenant renting a room in the Yu family home due to financial difficulties. He admitted hearing arguing during the night but hadn't paid much attention. Around 8 a.m., as he prepared to leave for work, he opened his... As Wu Zhongchen opened his door that morning, he was immediately attacked by a man wielding a knife. Wu fought back, suffering 6 stab wounds and bleeding heavily. Fortunately, being a former soldier with a strong build, he managed to disarm the attacker after a brief but intense struggle at first. He considered killing the man in retaliation, but his rational mind prevailed instead. He slashed the attacker's face. Both men were injured and exhausted after the fight. Wu then tried reasoning with his assailant. "We have no personal vendetta. Why are you doing this? Let's stop now. I'll return to my room. You should leave." He retreated to his room, locked the door, and armed himself with electrical repair tools. Terrified the attacker might break in through the ventilation window from his vantage point. He could see the intruder in the living room around 4 p.m. Wu heard Ms. Yu return home, followed by a violent struggle. Screams and desperate pleas, then silence, assuming Mrs. Yu had been killed. Wu finally summoned the courage to call his boss, explaining he wouldn't be coming in and requesting help when the police arrived. They found Wu's room locked. A locksmith opened the door to reveal bloodstains and a bloodied fruit knife. However, several details puzzled investigators. If Wu had overpowered the attacker and taken the knife, why had he then stayed in his room? And if he had seen the attacker's face, why had the killer been allowed to leave? According to Wu, he remained in the room until the attacker departed. But the murder weapon was still found there. So how had Mrs. Yu later been killed with the same knife? Adding to the confusion, Wu had initially called his boss rather than the police, which seemed odd. Investigators also found a button lodged in one of Wu's footprints, matching the bloody prints at the crime scene. Could it all have been staged by Wu? Initially, police suspected that Wu, who was close in age to Shan Chan, might have developed an unhealthy obsession with her. Perhaps, after a confrontation with her father, he decided to kill the parents and daughter, then injure himself to fabricate a story. But this theory had major inconsistencies. If Wu had committed the murders, why wait 13 hours to kill Mrs. Yu? These unanswered questions forced the investigation into a dead end. The police began to consider the possibility of a 5th person being involved. Though Wu remained the primary suspect in the public eye due to media coverage, evidence suggested otherwise. A reinvestigation of the crime scene revealed further clues. Furniture had been displaced, and blood covered floors and walls. But from the bedroom to the living room, there were clear signs of cleaning. A blood-stained mop confirmed that the killer had tried and failed to erase evidence. New bloodstains, not matching the Yu family or Wu, were discovered in the master bedroom, including a small droplet that appeared to belong to the real killer, the 5th person. During a second interrogation, Wu provided additional details to clear his name. He revealed that on the night of December 12th, he had overheard words suggesting a love affair. He also recalled hearing Shan Chan's boyfriend arguing with her parents 2 nights prior. Investigators seized on these leads, wondering if the massacre had been triggered by a forbidden romance gone wrong. Examining Shan Chan's computer confirmed this theory. She had been in a secret relationship with a teacher named Duan Cheng. Despite a 16-year age difference, diaries, notes, and interviews with classmates confirmed a multi-year romantic relationship. Shan Chan's parents had been adamantly opposed to it, which investigators suspected motivated Duan Cheng's brutal actions. Police quickly located the school where Duan Cheng taught. He had called in sick on the day of the murders, returning the next day with a visible wound on his face, consistent with Wu's account of the attack. Suspicious. Duan Cheng then requested a week off, and when officers visited his residence, it was empty. Even his pet dog was gone. It was clear he was the culprit. On the run, police immediately organized teams to track him down. Their efforts paid off at his sister's house, where he was caught preparing to flee, his car packed with essentials in his vehicle. Authorities found a pair of sneakers, cleaned, but still bearing traces of blood. The tread matched the bloody footprints at the crime scene, and the blood tested positive as belonging to one of the victims faced with arrest. Duan Chung mumbled, "I faced with arrest." Duan Chung mumbled, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," but the evidence was overwhelming. Investigators quickly pieced together his movements that night. After killing Shan Chan's parents, he had hidden in the house for hours, waiting to ambush Shan Chan. His careful timing explained why Wu had been left alive, yet why Mrs. Yu and her family had suffered such a brutal fate during interrogation. Duan Chung eventually confessed. He admitted to a deep obsession with Shan Chan and a long-standing resentment toward her parents, who had relentlessly opposed the relationship. He claimed he had confronted them earlier that week, and when they refused to relent, rage consumed him. Armed with a kitchen knife he had brought with him, he intended to eliminate any obstacles to be with Shan Chan. Tragically, his plan escalated into a massacred. Wan Jung's confession also confirmed the minor details that had baffled the police. The blood droplet found in the master bedroom belonged to him, matching the wound Wu had inflicted on his face during the initial struggle. The blood-stained mop indicated his attempt to clean up, but in his panic and haste, he left evidence behind that would ultimately unravel the case further. Forensic analysis confirmed that all the wounds on the victims were consistent with a single weapon, a fruit knife from the family kitchen, which Duan had wielded in a frenzy. The meticulous collection of evidence, including Wu's testimony, the footprints, and the blood traces on Duan's shoes, created a complete narrative of the crime in court. The prosecution emphasized Duan Chung's premeditation, the extreme violence, and the cold-blooded nature of the killings. They argued that his obsession and personal vendetta against the family transformed him into a deliberate and ruthless killer. Wu's heroic efforts to survive were also highlighted, showing that the surviving tenant had provided critical testimony that led to the truth. A jury, after reviewing exhaustive evidence, unanimously found Duan Chung guilty of triple murder and multiple charges of assault. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring that justice was served for Shan Chan and her parents. The case left a lasting impact on Taipei and beyond. It was a chilling reminder of how obsession and forbidden desires could erupt into catastrophic violence. It also highlighted the importance of careful investigation, forensic detail, and not succumbing to surface appearances. The public had almost wrongfully convicted Wu Zhengchen, a survivor, an unlikely hero, before the truth emerged. Ultimately, the Yu family murders became a notorious example in criminal justice studies, a tragic story born of love, obsession, and unbridled rage, but one where diligent police work and the resilience of a single witness ensured that the real perpetrator was held accountable, with Duan Chung behind bars. The chilling saga of the Yu family murders came to an official close, yet the emotional and psychological ripples of the case continued to be felt. Wu Zhengchen, once a prime suspect, emerged as an unlikely hero whose survival and presence at the scene were pivotal in bringing the real killer to justice. The case served as a stark reminder of the danger of assumptions, the importance of evidence over appearances, and the thin line between perception and truth taken together. The 4 cases explored here, from J.N. Chong, Zhou's elaborate financial fraud, and the manipulative schemes of professional deceivers, to Lena's calculated thallium poisoning of her husband, and finally to the grisly Yu family murders, reveal a common thread: human vulnerability, obsession, and the complex interplay of ambition, desire, and resentment can lead to tragic outcomes. In J.N. Chung, Zhou's case, the story demonstrated how manipulation and deceit can prey on trust and naivety, showing the modern dangers of sophisticated fraud. The case highlighted the cold efficiency of a person who treats human emotions as tools for personal gain. Lena's story, in contrast, explored the darker corners of intimate relationships, where resentment, unmet expectations, and unaddressed conflicts transformed a once promising marriage into a deadly trap here. Intelligence and access became instruments of destruction, proving that even the brightest talents can be consumed by envy, jealousy, and obsession. Finally, the Yu family murders underscored the terrifying consequences of obsession and forbidden desire. It also emphasized the importance of careful, methodical investigation, misinterpretations, wrongful assumptions, and superficial judgments. Almost led to the conviction of an innocent man. In contrast, careful forensic work, survivor testimony, and persistence ultimately revealed the truth. Each story also reflects a broader lesson: the dangers of ignoring warning signs, underestimating human psychology, or failing to communicate effectively in relationships, both personal and professional, whether through financial deception, marital betrayal, or violent obsession. These narratives illuminate the fragility of trust, the weight of unspoken resentments, and the extreme consequences of human emotions left unchecked. As we close this series, one truth becomes clear: the world is a landscape of both subtle and overt dangers, where the line between ordinary life and catastrophe can be alarmingly thin. Vigilance, awareness, and empathy remain our strongest tools, not only to protect ourselves, but to recognize and respond to the hidden complexities in others. Through understanding these stories, we are reminded that crime is rarely random. It is often rooted in desire, obsession, opportunity, and human frailty. These cases compel us to look deeper, question assumptions, and confront the darker aspects of human nature, so that society may better safeguard the innocent and seek justice for the victims. Everything finally clicked. What about the message on Shanshan's computer that had ultimately broken through Han Chung's defenses during interrogation? That text was a critical piece of evidence. It revealed the depth of his obsession and his perception of betrayal. Seeing Shan's words confronting him with her intentions and her acknowledgement of the family's opposition triggered a mixture of guilt, anger, and frustration that he could no longer contain. Confronted with this undeniable proof, Han Chung began to recount the events in full detail, exposing the motive, the planning, and the sequence of murders. It became evident that his actions had been driven by a twisted sense of injustice. Han Chung felt cornered, exploited, and humiliated not only by Shanshan's parents, but, in his mind, by Shanshan herself. Each act of violence was fueled by this escalating resentment, transforming what had once been a secretive romantic relationship into a deadly vendetta. The message on Shanshan's computer had pierced his psychological armor, forcing him to confess and providing investigators with the clarity needed to piece together the horrifying chain of events that led to the massacre. With this revelation, the investigators could finally connect all the threads: the timing of the murders, the duplicate knives, the footprints, and the blood evidence, all corroborated by Han Chung's testimony. The case, once mired in uncertainty and speculation, was now fully solved, and the truth of the tragedy was laid bare for the court and for the public. After Han Chung's confession, the police and prosecutors moved quickly to prepare the case for trial. Every detail he provided, from the planning, the weapons, the timing, and even his psychological state, was meticulously documented. The dual knives, the footprints, the blood evidence, and Wu's testimony all aligned perfectly with his account. Leaving no doubt about his guilt during the trial, Han Chung maintained a defiant demeanor at first, attempting to downplay his responsibility. However, as evidence mounted, and eyewitness accounts, digital messages, and forensic analysis were presented, his defenses crumbled. The court was shown the text messages from Shanshan's computer, his detailed planning notes, and the sequence of events leading up to the murders. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Han Chung's obsession, combined with anger at perceived betrayal, had escalated into calculated, brutal violence against an entire family. The jury deliberated for only a short period before returning a guilty verdict. Han Chung was sentenced to life imprisonment without The possibility of parole, the verdict, provided a measure of closure for the community, though the horror of the crime lingered as a stark reminder of how obsession, secrecy, and unresolved conflicts can lead to unimaginable tragedy. This case, like the previous stories of Wang Xia and Lina, highlighted the dark consequences of personal grievances left unchecked. It showed how passion can spiral into violence when combined with manipulation, entitlement, or extreme emotional responses for Shanshan, her parents, and the families affected. Justice was served, but at an incalculable human cost. These 4 cases, ranging from thallium poisoning in America to a brutal family massacre in Taipei, serve as haunting lessons about human nature, love, and the consequences of unresolved conflicts. They remind us that behind every statistic or headline lies a deeply human story, filled with choices, emotions, and consequences that ripple far beyond the individuals involved. Since recent activities and movements, they discovered that she had been practicing riding the new electric scooter in the park the night of her disappearance, as she had told her husband. The placement of the scooter at the bottom of the lake, still powered on, along with the fresh scratch on the bridge, strongly indicated that she had collided with the bridge's edge, lost control, and fallen into the water. Forensic analysis of the body further supported this theory. The presence of water in her lungs and blood foam in the nasal and oral cavities confirmed that she had been alive when she entered the lake. Consistent with drowning, no defensive injuries or signs of a struggle were present, suggesting there was no foul play. The depth of the lake, though shallow, coupled with the shock and disorientation from falling while riding the scooter, could have caused her to panic, inhale water, and ultimately drowned. The police also examined the possibility of mechanical failure in the scooter, but initial checks indicated the scooter was in proper working condition. The investigation concluded that the accident was unintentional, resulting from a combination of misjudgment and the limitations of the scooter on the uneven terrain of the bridge. With these findings, the case was closed. As an accidental drowning, Lang was devastated, but relieved to know that there had been no foul play involved. The tragic incident highlighted the risks of nighttime scooter riding in parks and served as a cautionary tale for others to take proper safety measures when using personal electric vehicles. After concluding that Fonsine's death was a tragic accident, investigators shifted focus to documenting every detail of the incident to prevent similar tragedies in the future. They mapped out the precise location of the fall, took measurements of the bridge and lake, and reconstructed the scene to understand how such a seemingly minor misstep could have fatal consequences. Local authorities also used this incident to raise public awareness about park safety and proper handling of electric scooters, especially at night. Lang, still grappling with grief, cooperated fully with the authorities, providing insight into his wife's habits, recent activities, and the circumstances surrounding her practice sessions. The combined evidence from eyewitness accounts, the recovered scooter, scratches on the bridge, and forensic examination painted a clear picture of an accidental drowning caused by a collision rather than foul play. Though the case lacked the malicious intent and shocking violence of the previous stories, it left an indelible mark on the community. The narrative served as a sobering reminder of how quickly an everyday activity could turn fatal, and the importance of vigilance. Even in familiar surroundings, families in the area were urged to supervise young adults and ensure they were aware of the risks of nighttime activities, particularly when operating vehicles like scooters near water. Ultimately, the case of Fonsine closed with a verdict of accidental death, while there was relief that no crime had been committed. The emotional toll on her husband, friends, and the local community was profound. It also served as a contrast to the other stories of deceit, jealousy, and murder, illustrating that not all tragic ends are born from malice, arise from misfortune and circumstance, leaving a painful yet important lesson in safety and awareness. This completes the 5th story, with the conclusion of Fonsine's case. The series of tragic tales paints a diverse but haunting panorama of human emotion, love, ambition, jealousy, greed, and misfortune, each spiraling into consequences that forever altered lives across continents and cultures. These stories share one common thread: the fragility of trust and the unpredictable outcomes of human actions, from Lena's calculated betrayal in the United States to Han Chung's obsessive violence in Taipei, and the accidental, yet devastating, misstep of Fan Xin in China. These narratives serve as grim reminders that both intention and circumstance can have irreversible outcomes. They challenge us to reflect on the choices we make, the relationships we nurture, and the systems in place that either protect or fail us. For viewers following these true crime cases, the stories emphasize that tragedy doesn't always wear the same face. Some arise from calculated malice, some from impulsive emotional reactions, and some from sheer misfortune. What unites them is the lingering effect on those left behind: grief, shock, and the haunting question of what could have been done differently. As we close this chapter of Crime Whispers, each tale leaves its mark, a cautionary message that the human heart, while capable of great love, is equally capable of actions that lead to destruction. Understanding, communication, and vigilance are not just virtues. They are safeguards against the sometimes dark trajectories of life, whether it's the meticulous plotting of a poisoned spouse, the fury of a rejected lover, or the simple tragedy of a misjudged step. These cases underscore the fragile balance between everyday life and the sudden intrusion of catastrophic crime. Whispers reminds us that in every quiet neighborhood, bustling city, or secluded park, stories unfold that are stranger, darker, and more revealing than fiction. And as we continue to explore these narratives, one truth remains: human behavior, in all its complexity, is both captivating and cautionary. Further investigation into Fan Xin's accident revealed that, while the incident may have been unintended, it highlighted how quickly ordinary actions can escalate into tragedy. The electric scooter's fall and her subsequent drowning in a shallow, artificial lake demonstrated the interplay of timing, environmental hazards, and human misjudgment. It served as a sobering reminder that even minor risks, like riding alone at night, can have fatal consequences. For her husband, Lenga, the grief was compounded by the shock and confusion of understanding how a loved one could perish in such an improbable scenario, unlike the calculated malice seen in the other cases. Fan Xin's death was a tragic accident, yet it underscores that not all tragedies are the result of intent. Some are the cruel product of circumstance. As Crime Whispers examines these 5 cases, from Lena's calculated poisoning to Han Chung's obsessive vengeance to Fan Xin's accidental death, a clear pattern emerges. Human emotions, whether driven by love, anger, ambition, or desperation, can lead to irreversible outcomes. Relationships that seem secure can unravel in devastating ways, and even small conflicts left unresolved can escalate beyond imagination. Each story serves as a cautionary tale. Lena's meticulous plotting shows the lethal potential of resentment and jealousy. Han Chung's spree reflects how obsession and perceived betrayal can trigger uncontrollable violence. Fan Xin's accident illustrates the fragility of life and the unexpected consequences of everyday choices. Together, they paint a stark picture of vulnerability, human error, and the consequences of unchecked emotions. These cases remind us that vigilance, communication, and emotional awareness are critical not just for survival, but for preserving the fragile bonds of trust that hold our relationships together. They also show that while some tragedies can be prevented with foresight, others emerge from circumstances beyond control, leaving only lessons and memories in their wake. Crime Whispers presents these stories not merely as accounts of crime, but as examinations of the human psyche, the consequences of decisions, and the unpredictability of life. Each case leaves a lasting mark, urging us to reflect on our own relationships, actions, and the world around. Using the end, whether through calculated malice, passionate obsession, or tragic accident, these tales compel us to confront a hard truth. Life is fragile, and the line between love and tragedy can be thinner than we ever imagine. As we reflect on these cases, one thing becomes clear. The motives behind crime are as diverse as the human heart itself in Lena's case. Ambition, jealousy, and resentment transformed love into murder for Han Chung. Obsession and a sense of betrayal ignited a calculated rage that left an entire family dead, and in Fonzine's tragedy, misfortune and a single moment of inattention proved fatal. These stories share a common thread: the dangerous consequences of unaddressed emotions, unspoken grievances, and unresolved conflicts. They reveal that beneath the surface of ordinary lives, careers, families, and seemingly mundane routines lurks a potential for disaster. They remind us that vigilance, communication, and empathy are not just virtues, but essential safeguards against irreversible loss. Crime Whispers does not tell these stories merely to shock, but to offer lessons. Each case is a mirror, reflecting our own choices, relationships, and actions. They warn that even the smallest misunderstandings, if left unchecked, can spiral into catastrophe. They urge us to examine how ambition, love, and anger shape the decisions we make every day. Whether it is a premeditated act of revenge, a crime born of passion, or an accidental misfortune, the outcomes are universally tragic. These narratives challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior and the fragility of life. They remind us that, while we cannot control every circumstance, we can strive to act with awareness, understanding, and compassion. As we close this chapter of Crime Whispers, remember that the line between ordinary life and tragedy is often thinner than it seems. The stories of Lena, Han Chung, Fonzine, and others leave us with lingering questions. How far would emotions drive a person? How might we prevent such tragedies in our own lives? And most importantly, how do we protect those we love from the unpredictable turns of fate? These are the lessons hidden in the darkness of true crime, lessons that endure long after the headlines fade in. The shadows of everyday life. Ordinary decisions can spiral into extraordinary consequences, from ambition and jealousy to obsession and misfortune. The human heart often carries the seeds of its own destruction. Lena and Shia's marriage had once promised hope, love, and shared dreams, yet beneath the surface, resentment, unmet expectations, and constant conflict festered. Over time, small arguments grew into bitter disputes, and silent frustrations became deadly intentions. With access to thallium, a toxic substance she understood all too well, Lena's suppressed rage transformed into a calculated act of murder, the meticulous planning, the hidden poison, and the eventual collapse of her carefully constructed facade reveal a chilling truth. Love, when twisted by bitterness and ambition, can destroy even the most promising future. Meanwhile, in Taipei, a different kind of tragedy unfolded. A forbidden love affair between a teacher and his student escalated into an unimaginable nightmare. Han Chung's passion, once tender and devoted, became entangled with obsession and a sense of betrayal. Faced with parental opposition, financial impossibility, and perceived disloyalty, his emotions boiled over into a murderous rampage that claimed 3 innocent lives. The careful planning, the 2 identical knives, the staged hiding of a weapon, all were pieces of a puzzle that took days for investigators to decode. A life once filled with love ended in tragedy, underscoring the destructive power of obsession left unchecked. And in Changzhou, a young woman's life was cut short by a tragic accident. Or so it first appeared. A red electric scooter, a shallow artificial lake, and a single moment of misjudgment revealed a harsh reality. Even ordinary circumstances, when coupled with inexperience or misfortune, can become fatal. Investigators pieced together the scene, reconstructing events that led to her untimely death, and reminding us that tragedy does not always come from malice. It can come from life's unpredictable twists, from poison to knives, from calculated rage to tragic accidents. Each of these cases exposes the fragile boundary between life and death, love and hatred, intention and misfortune. They remind us that beneath the routines of daily life lie emotions unspoken, unresolved, that can escalate in ways we never imagine. These stories are more than headlines, they are mirrors, reflecting the complexity of human emotion and the consequences of actions. Large and small, they warn us to communicate, to empathize, and to confront conflicts before they spiral beyond repair in the end. Crime Whispers is not just about crime, it's about understanding the choices that lead to it, and learning how to navigate the delicate, often unpredictable, balance of human relationships, because in the shadows of our everyday lives, the line between normalcy and tragedy is often thinner than we realize. Investigators turned their attention to Fong Xin's activities on the night of the incident, according to surveillance footage from her residential complex. At 8:57 p.m. on May 9, 2013, she was seen riding her electric scooter at the entrance. Additional footage from a nearby road near the artificial lake captured her around 9:20 p.m., riding with apparent confidence, suggesting she was not a beginner. However, one detail immediately raised suspicion. Fong Xin lived in the Xinbi district, while the park, where her body was later discovered, was located in a relatively remote industrial area, approximately 3 miles away. If her stated purpose was simply to practice riding, why would she choose a dark, isolated park instead of a safer, nearby location? The circumstances suggested that her real reason for going out that night may have been something more secretive. To uncover the truth, police began investigating Fong Xin's social relationships. According to her husband, Lang Bei had only recently married in March 2013, and she had not been working outside the home. Her sudden overnight outing was unusual, heightening suspicion. The autopsy confirmed drowning as the cause of death, but both Lang and Fong Xin's mother expressed doubts, urging further investigation. Lang also revealed that Fong Xin's newly purchased iPhone was missing, insisting that it might hold crucial information about her contacts and the events leading up to her death. Divers were hired, and the phone was recovered from the lake. Analysis of the call logs revealed that at 8:51 p.m., Fong Xin received a 58-second call from a number ending in 6716. Later, at 9:28 p.m., Lang himself called her to ask why she was out so late. A call lasting just over a minute. The mystery number, traced to Fong Xin's older sister, was actually being used by someone else, likely Fong Xin herself or a close associate. Questioning revealed the SIM card may have been in use by a man named Zhou Ju, 29, who shared a hometown with Lang, had stayed with the couple, and had a close relationship with them. Around 10 days before Fong Xin's death, Zhou Gu had suddenly moved out of the apartment without giving a clear reason. Further deepening investigators' suspicions, police quickly reviewed surveillance footage near the park and found Zhou Gu being dropped off by a taxi around 8 p.m., staying in the park for several hours. The next morning, around 4:30 a.m., he was seen leaving the area in another taxi. The driver noted that when Zhou Gu paid for the ride, the cash was wet, and water stains were left on the taxi seat. This evidence strongly suggested that Zhou Gu had been present at the park during the night of the incident, and the police began piecing together the possibility that he had played a critical role in Fong Xin's death based on the taxi footage and the wet cash. The police suspected that Zhou Gu had been directly involved in Fong Xin's death. Officers coordinated a search of his registered residence in Bu Town, but the apartment was empty. It was clear he had fled, likely trying to avoid arrest. With this new lead, the authorities intensified their efforts, establishing checkpoints and contacting nearby transportation hubs. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Fong Xin's body and the recovered electric scooter revealed further clues. The scooter showed scratches consistent with her being forcibly thrown or losing control near the edge of the suspension bridge, combined with the evidence of water in the taxi seat and the suspicious call from Zhou Ju's number. The police began to piece together a chilling scenario. Fong Xin had not accidentally drowned. She had likely been lured or coerced to the park by someone she trusted or someone close to her household using digital tracking. The police traced Zhou Ju's phone activity after the incident. It revealed erratic movements consistent with someone on the run. Investigators then issued a nationwide alert. sharing Jo Ju's image and description with both local authorities and the public within days. Jo Gu was spotted by local law enforcement at a rental property in a neighboring province. Officers moved in. Surrounding the location, Jo Gu attempted to flee, but was apprehended without incident during questioning. He initially denied involvement, claiming he had only been in the park that night. Coincidentally, however, evidence from the surveillance footage, call logs, and forensic analysis quickly contradicted his story. Under further interrogation, Jo Ju's defenses began to crumble. Investigators presented the wet cache, his presence in the park at the exact time of Fong Xin's disappearance, and inconsistencies in his alibi. Realizing the case against him was overwhelming, Jo Gu finally confessed. He admitted that he had planned the encounter at the park, intending to confront Fong Xin over a personal dispute. The situation escalated unexpectedly, leading to her drowning. The case was brought to trial later that year. Prosecutors meticulously presented the chain of evidence: the suspicious calls, surveillance footage, forensic findings, and the recovered scooter. The defense tried to argue that Fong Xin's death was accidental, but the overwhelming evidence, particularly Jo Ju's confession and the corroborating digital and physical evidence, left little room for doubt. The court ultimately found Jo Gu guilty of intentional homicide. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, bringing some measure of closure to Fong Xin's grieving family. While justice was served, the case left a lasting impression on the community, highlighting the dangers of seemingly ordinary social relationships and the unpredictable consequences of trust and deception. Jo had entered the lake, a discovery that immediately heightened suspicion that he may have been involved in Fong Xin's death. On June 13, 2013, nearly a month after the incident, the police finally managed to confront Jo, facing the investigators. He did not attempt to evade responsibility. He admitted that he had indeed called Fong Xin that night and arranged to meet her in the park. Jo explained that they had been romantically involved and had started their affair about a month prior. To avoid detection by Leng, Fong Xin's husband, Jo had moved out of their shared residence but continued seeking opportunities to meet her in secret. According to Jo, on the night of the incident, he took a taxi to the park and waited for Fong Xin. Around 9:30 p.m., she arrived, riding her electric scooter. The two spent time together, speaking and engaging romantically, until around 11 p.m. When Fong Xin suggested returning home, Jo got on the back of her scooter, but as they crossed the suspension bridge, Fong Xin allegedly lost control, causing both of them and the scooter to fall into the lake. Jo claimed he managed to climb out and save himself, but Fong Xin vanished into the water, paralyzed by fear and the shame of their secret relationship. Jo did not report the incident and fled the scene. Instead, while his account initially seemed plausible, the police quickly identified a major flaw. The lake was shallow, just 475 feet deep, and even with a thin layer of mud at the bottom, the water level would have only reached Fong Xin's neck while standing in her heels. Forensic analysis confirmed mud on her shoes and stockings consistent with the lake bed, indicating she had likely been upright in the water. Drowning under these conditions would have been extremely difficult without external force, and Jo was the only other person present. Repeated questioning, Jo refused to provide further details, insisting it had been an accident, and expressing only regret for failing to save Fong Xin with no breakthrough from his testimony. The investigators redirected their focus to the victim at this point. Leng, Fong Xin's husband, returned to the police station to inquire about the case. Surprisingly, rather than showing anger over his wife's secret affair, Leng seemed more concerned about the procedural aspects, asking when her body could be released and when the death certificate could be issued for cremation. This unusual behavior puzzled the investigators initially. Leng had refused to sign the death certificate, hoping the police would continue their investigation. Yet more than a month later, he suddenly insisted on concluding the case quickly. Simultaneously, Fong Xin's parents provided a crucial lead. She had purchased a personal accident insurance policy before her death, The policy, bought by Lang after their marriage in March 2013, had a payout of 1 million yuan. Further investigation revealed additional policies totaling 45 million yuan, approximately $640,000. The police grew suspicious the policies were short-term, high-coverage, accident insurance typically purchased by people in high-risk occupations, not ordinary civilians. Further, while Fong Xin initially listed her legal heirs as beneficiaries, Lang had changed the beneficiaries a week after the policy was issued, making himself the sole recipient. These findings suggested that Lang's unusual behavior and insurance arrangements might be linked to his wife's death. Investigators began closely examining the couple's relationship. Fong Xin had lived independently in Changzhou, Jiangsu province, working various jobs, including restaurant server, hair salon assistant, and receptionist at an internet cafe. She had experienced pressure from her parents to marry in early 2013. She met Lang by chance, according to her cousin Fong Tianli. She and Lang quickly developed a relationship after their marriage in March 2013. Fong Xin largely stayed at home, which was unusual for her. She had previously been independent and outgoing, making her sudden reclusiveness stand out to her family. This, combined with her husband's insistence on controlling aspects of her life, including handling the insurance policies, raised further red flags for investigators. The police then began examining Len's behavior leading up to the night of Fong Xin's death. They discovered that he had purchased multiple high-value accident insurance policies for his wife in a short span of time. Not only had he made himself the sole beneficiary, but he had also selected policies that would pay out significant sums in the event of accidental death. This carefully timed financial maneuver suggested premeditation. Next, the investigator scrutinized the timeline of Fong Xin's movements on the night she died. Surveillance footage showed her riding to the park on her electric scooter at 8:57 p.m. Supposedly to practice riding. She was later seen crossing the suspension bridge at 9:30 p.m., where Joe claimed the accident occurred. However, the shallow depth of the lake and forensic evidence suggested that even if she fell, she could have stood upright in the water, making drowning unlikely without interference. The inconsistencies in Joe's account, coupled with Len's sudden insistence on finalizing the case and his financial incentives, shifted suspicion onto the husband. Investigators theorized that Lang may have used the opportunity of the late-night outing and the isolated park to stage Fong Xin's death as an accident, knowing that Joe's secretive presence at the park would divert attention. Further forensic analysis revealed traces of substances on Fong Xin's clothing and body that were inconsistent with a simple fall, while Joe had been present at the scene. The evidence suggested he did not directly cause her death. Instead, it pointed to a third party, likely someone who knew the victim's routine and had motive. Means, an opportunity. Faced with mounting evidence, the investigators confronted Lang under pressure. He eventually confessed that he had deliberately orchestrated the drowning to claim the insurance payout. Lang admitted that he had lured Fong Xin to the park under the pretense of meeting Joe, ensuring she would be isolated and vulnerable. Once at the bridge, he had forced her into the lake, calculating that the shallow depth and darkness would prevent witnesses while making it appear accidental. The combination of premeditated insurance policies, behavioral inconsistencies, and forensic evidence left no doubt about his culpability. Lang was arrested and formally charged with murder and fraud. The case shocked the local community, revealing a chilling betrayal where love, trust, and marital bonds were manipulated for financial gain. In the end, the court sentenced Lang to life imprisonment without parole, emphasizing that greed and calculated malice had extinguished an innocent life. The tragic death of Fong Xin served as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind seemingly ordinary domestic relationships, and how even carefully concealed crimes can unravel under meticulous investigation. With Lang's arrest and conviction, the case of Fong Xin finally reached closure, but the echoes of tragedy remained. Her family grieved not only the loss of their daughter, but also the betrayal by someone she trusted most. Friends and neighbors were left questioning how an apparently ordinary marriage could conceal such dark intentions. The story, like the previous cases, highlighted how love, trust, and deception can intersect with greed, obsession, and violence to produce devastating consequences. Across these 5 stories, from the poisoned husband in Taiwan to the deadly consequences of a forbidden romance, and the calculated murder for insurance money, the common threads were heartbreak, manipulation, and the fragile line between affection and obsession. Each tale demonstrated how personal motives, unaddressed conflicts, and hidden resentments could escalate into irreversible tragedies for investigators, journalists, and families alike. These cases serve as grim reminders. The smallest actions, secret calls, unspoken threats, overlooked arguments can trigger catastrophic outcomes. The tireless work of the police, forensic teams, and legal authorities ensured that justice was pursued, uncovering hidden truths that might have otherwise remained buried beneath assumptions and rumors. Ultimately, these stories are not just chronicles of crime, they are narratives of human vulnerability, emotional intensity, and the consequences of choices made in moments of passion, greed, or desperation. They teach us that vigilance, communication, and awareness are vital in preventing tragedy, and that behind every headline is a network of lives forever changed by the actions of a few. Echoes of these tragedies continue to resonate, reminding us that understanding human behavior, motives, and relationships is crucial not only for justice, but for the preservation of life and trust in our communication. Could regain her balance. Sue grabbed her and forcibly held her under the water until she drowned. He later admitted that in that moment, all hesitation and guilt vanished, replaced by the cold determination to ensure no witnesses remained. Sue then climbed out himself, leaving Fong Xin submerged, and staged the scene to look like an accidental drowning caused by the scooter. Afterwards, Sue fled the area, leaving no trace of his presence until the next morning. When he returned to his normal routine, he avoided contact with authorities and kept silent, hoping the death would be ruled accidental. Meanwhile, Lang, unaware of the full extent of Sue's actions, maintained the facade of a concerned husband searching for his missing wife, all while preparing to claim the sizable insurance payout. Forensic inconsistencies, the shallow depth of the lake, the mud on Fong Xin's heels, and the impossibility of drowning under normal circumstances eventually led investigators to question Sue, combined with the suspicious insurance policies and his connection to the couple. Police pressure finally forced Sue to confess. His admission confirmed the premeditated nature of the crime and revealed the cruel manipulation behind the seemingly ordinary tragedy. This case starkly demonstrated how greed, secrecy, and hidden relationships could culminate in calculated murder. Even when the initial appearance suggested a simple accident, it also highlighted the critical role of thorough investigation and forensic analysis in uncovering the truth behind carefully staged scenes. Once Sue confessed, the police were able to piece together the full timeline of events that fateful night. They confirmed that he had coordinated with Lang beforehand, taking advantage of Lang's obsession with controlling Fong Xin and the lucrative insurance policies. Lang's eagerness to secure the payout after the death now made sense. It wasn't mere grief driving him to push for a swift closure, but a carefully calculated plan to profit from the tragedy with both Sue and Lang implicated. The investigators reconstructed the scene at the suspension bridge. They determined that Sue had deliberately targeted the broken railing as a means to stage an accident. The shallow lake depth, combined with Sue's deliberate force, ensured that Fong Xin could not survive. Despite the water being insufficient to drown someone standing upright, the presence of mud on her shoes, inconsistent with a simple fall, corroborated his confession that she had been forcibly held underwater. Further investigation revealed that Sue had meticulously planned the encounter to avoid detection, selecting a dark, deserted park 3 miles from the residential area, and, waiting for Fong Xin to arrive. Alone, Lang's role was secondary, providing a cover story, and later manipulating insurance claims. The evidence clearly showed that this was not an accidental drowning, but a premeditated murder executed under the guise of a tragic mishap in the aftermath. Both Su and Lang were formally charged, Su for the murder of Fong Xin, and Lang for conspiracy to profit from the crime and aiding in the cover-up. The case became a high-profile trial, drawing attention to the dark consequences of greed, deception, and illicit relationships. For the police, the resolution highlighted the importance of connecting small clues, from phone records and surveillance footage to forensic evidence, to unravel even the most carefully staged crimes. The tragedy of Fong Xin's death served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that beneath seemingly ordinary circumstances, sinister motives can lurk, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to dig deeper. The trial that followed was intense, and closely followed by the public prosecutors laid out a detailed timeline, highlighting the coordination between Su and Lang, the manipulation of the insurance policies, and the premeditated actions leading up to Fong Xin's death. They presented forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and Su's confession, all of which painted a picture of cold calculation rather than accident. Lang's defense tried to argue ignorance and lack of intent, claiming he had no knowledge of Su's plan to harm Fong Xin. However, the investigators and prosecutors countered this with evidence of his unusual behavior before and after the incident. The hurried insurance purchase, his insistence on quickly closing the case, and his ability to remain unusually calm even as the investigation dragged on. Su, meanwhile, faced no room for defense. His confession and the consistency of forensic evidence left little doubt of his direct involvement. The court considered the emotional and psychological factors that had influenced both men, but ultimately determined that greed, deceit, and premeditation had driven the fatal outcome. In the end, the court sentenced Su to life imprisonment for murder and Lang to a substantial prison term for conspiracy and fraud. The ruling also included heavy fines and the forfeiture of insurance payouts, ensuring that neither man could benefit financially from their crime. Fong Xin's family, while devastated by her loss, expressed relief that justice had been served and that the truth about her death had finally come to light. The case became a cautionary tale in China about the dangers of unchecked ambition, greed, and secretive relationships, as well as the critical role of careful police work in uncovering hidden motives and bringing perpetrators to justice. Investigators reflected on how a combination of meticulous surveillance, forensic analysis, and careful interrogation had solved a case that initially seemed like a tragic accident. It reinforced the lesson that even the most carefully constructed lies can unravel under the scrutiny of persistent investigation. After the trial, the case prompted significant public discussion and media coverage. It wasn't just the shocking betrayal and murder that captured attention, but also the financial motives intertwined with a clandestine romance. Legal analysts dissected how short-term accident insurance policies could be manipulated, warning the public about the risks of hastily arranged coverage with minimal oversight. Psychologists and social commentators weighed in on the dynamics of Fong Xin's relationships with both Su and Lang. They noted how vulnerability, inexperience, and financial temptation had made her situation precarious, highlighting the dangers that can arise when young individuals are swept into rapid, intense relationships without sufficient time to gauge character and intentions. The police department also reviewed its investigative methods in the case, identifying key factors that allowed them to solve it. Despite the initial misdirection, the combination of digital evidence, surveillance footage, forensic analysis of the lake, and careful interrogation had been critical in unraveling the truth. In training sessions, the case was used as an example of how seemingly straightforward accidents could conceal premeditated crimes. Meanwhile, the community around Long Hutang Park remained shaken. The park, once a casual spot for exercise and leisure, became a place that evoked cautionary tales about secrecy and hidden danger. Local authorities installed additional lighting and surveillance to prevent similar tragedies in the future over time. The story of Fong Xin's death, Su's confession, and Leng's conspiracy became emblematic of a broader societal lesson that appearances can be deceiving, and that careful investigation is essential to uncovering the reality behind even the most ordinary-looking events. The case also reinforced the notion that financial greed, when combined with secretive romantic entanglements, could escalate into lethal consequences. After the case concluded, both Su and Leng were prosecuted for their roles in Fong Xin's death. Su, as the direct perpetrator, faced the harshest sentence, while Leng, who had conspired and profited from the insurance policies, received a severe punishment for his involvement. The court highlighted the calculated nature of their actions, the deliberate planning, manipulation of trust, and exploitation of Fong Xin's vulnerability as aggravating factors. The trial also brought attention to systemic issues surrounding accident insurance policies. Regulators began tightening rules to prevent similar abuse, requiring more rigorous verification of beneficiaries and stricter oversight for policies purchased in short time frames with unusually high coverage. The case became a reference point in legal seminars and media discussions about the intersection of crime and financial exploitation. Psychological profiles of both Su and Leng revealed stark contrasts. Su, driven by jealousy and emotional turmoil, acted impulsively, while Leng exhibited cold calculation, carefully orchestrating a scenario to benefit financially from his wife's death. This juxtaposition sparked broader discussions in academic and legal circles about the psychology of crimes of passion versus financially motivated premeditated murders. Meanwhile, the community in Fong Xin's family grappled with grief and betrayal. Her parents, initially unaware of the affair and the hidden motives, struggled to come to terms with the layers of deception surrounding their daughters. Short life memorials and tributes were held, both to honor Fong Xin and to raise awareness about the dangers young people face in secretive relationships intertwined with financial manipulation. In the aftermath, law enforcement agencies reviewed their procedures for missing persons and drowning cases. The combination of digital evidence, surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and careful witness interrogation was recognized as a model for handling complex cases, where initial appearances could be misleading. Ultimately, the tragedy of Fong Xin's death served as a cautionary tale about trust, secrecy, and the lethal consequences of greed and manipulation. While justice had been pursued, the emotional scars for the family and the community remained, reminding society that even seemingly ordinary situations could hide extraordinary dangers. Su fully confessed to the police, revealing that Fong Xin had not died by accident, but was deliberately killed. He explained that after falling into the shallow lake, he had forced her underwater until she could no longer struggle. Su admitted that he regretted his actions, acknowledging that despite everything, Fong Xin had been the only person he truly loved. Su went on to detail how the murder was part of a larger scheme orchestrated by Leng after Leng's gambling business collapsed in late 2012. He faced debts totaling 500,000 yuan due by June 2013. To resolve his financial crisis, Leng devised a plan to target a vulnerable woman for insurance money. He strategically divorced his ex-wife Hang Yun and searched for a suitable target. After considering several candidates, he settled on Fong Xin, who had a modest life and was easily impressed by wealth. Within 2 weeks of meeting her on WeChat in February 2013, Leng had won Fong Xin over with lavish spending and proposed marriage. They quickly registered their marriage, bypassing any wedding ceremony or meeting of families immediately. Leng implemented the second phase of his plan, purchasing life and accident insurance policies in Fong Xin's name. He manipulated her jealousy and desire for security to become the sole beneficiary of these policies, while also orchestrating a luxurious lifestyle to maintain her trust. Leng then recruited Su, an obedient former classmate who admired him, to execute the murder. Su was instructed to seduce Fong Xin, develop a secret affair, and create an opportunity for her death. In early May 2013, Leng guided Su to arrange a private meeting under the guise of romance, knowing Fongxin would be lured into the trap on May 9th during the staged outing on her scooter. Su pushed Fongxin into the lake and held her underwater until she drowned, following the murder. Leng maintained a calm facade, acting disinterested. When Su reported the outcome, the final phase of the plan was filing insurance claims to secure the payout, which Leng justified as a way to satisfy his creditors and honor his financial promises. After over 2 months of meticulous investigation, the Changzhou City Police successfully unraveled the sophisticated plot on January 17, 2014. The Jiangsu Province Intermediate People's Court delivered its verdict. Leng was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death, in addition to 9 years for insurance fraud and a fine of 50,000 yuan. Su, as the direct accomplice, was also convicted of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, reflecting his role as the executor of Leng's meticulously planned crime. The court emphasized that while Su had committed the killing, his actions were heavily influenced and directed by Leng, the mastermind behind the plot. During the trial, prosecutors highlighted the extreme premeditation involved in the case. Leng had exploited Fongxin's trust, orchestrated her secret affair with Su, manipulated her emotions, and staged the scenario to appear accidental. To collect the insurance money, the court found that the crime demonstrated not only deliberate intent, but also cunning manipulation, making it one of the most complex and calculated murder for-profit cases in recent memory. The case drew widespread public attention due to the shocking combination of greed, deceit, and betrayal. Media outlets highlighted the stark contrast between Fongxin's brief, whirlwind marriage and the cold, calculated plot behind her death. Experts on criminal psychology commented on Leng's ability to manipulate both Su and his unsuspecting wife, demonstrating the danger of financial and emotional exploitation in intimate relationships. Leng, unrepentant throughout the investigation and trial, reportedly remained calm even after the death sentence was pronounced. In contrast, Su expressed remorse, acknowledging his misguided loyalty to Leng and the irreparable harm he had caused. The authorities praised the Changzhou City Police for their meticulous investigation, which involved tracking surveillance footage, phone records, insurance policies, and piecing together the complex web of deceit. Their work not only brought justice to Fongxin but also served as a cautionary tale about the lengths some individuals will go to exploit trust and love for financial gain. Ultimately, the case became a landmark example of premeditated murder intertwined with fraud, illustrating how manipulation, greed, and a calculated plan can lead to tragic consequences. It remains a sobering reminder of the risks hidden behind seemingly ordinary relationships and the importance of vigilance in uncovering the truth. He had received a death sentence with a 2-year suspension, was also sentenced to 6 years in prison for insurance fraud, and fined 30,000 yuan. The verdict was largely accepted by both the public and the victim's family. In the northeastern part of downtown Shanghai lies Hongkou District, home to a newlywed couple. The husband Xiaodong, 29, worked as a sales associate at a shopping mall, while his wife, Ling, also 29, was a primary school teacher specializing in literature. Xiaodong appeared handsome and charming, and Ling was gentle, kind, and beautiful. They seemed like the perfect couple, but beneath the surface, tensions were building that would ultimately lead to a shocking tragedy. Ling was later discovered dead, frozen in her husband's freezer. The story begins on February 1, 2017, the 5th day of the Chinese Lunar New Year, which coincided with Ling's father's 60th birthday, a day normally filled with celebrations. Friends and relatives came to offer their congratulations, but two people gained in. Ling's father was most eager to see Ling and Xiaodong were absent as the hours passed. Their absence became increasingly worrying. Ganan hadn't seen his daughter for 6 months, and the only communication had been through WeChat that day. Ling sent a message via WeChat. "Dad, Mom, I'm sorry, Xiaodong. and I are dealing with some issues. We need a little time to work things out. Please don't worry. We'll come visit after we sort everything out. Despite this message, her parents remained uneasy, sensing that something serious may have happened, concerned for their safety. They contacted the police initially. The investigation yielded no clues. Ling and Xiaodong seemed to have vanished without a trace. Desperate and anxious, Gainan and his wife hoped for quick news from the authorities. A few weeks later, a witness reported seeing a suspicious person near the couple's home, prompting a comprehensive search. Still, there was no word on their whereabouts. Gainan then received another message from Ling explaining that her phone was broken and she couldn't take calls. She also declined a meal invitation, citing work commitments, and mentioned she would travel to Hong Kong with friends to celebrate the Lunar New Year. Yet 5 days passed without any contact, and her parents' worry deepened. By 5 p.m., Gainan contacted Xiaodong's mother, Mrs. Zhou, who told him that Ling had encountered trouble and that both she and Xiaodong were at the police station when Gainan and his wife arrived. They were struck by devastating news. Their daughter Ling had been murdered. Ling was the youngest of 3 siblings and had always been cherished by her parents. She had a gentle nature, never raising her voice or engaging in arguments. After high school, she was accepted into the Chinese language department at Shanghai Normal University. Following graduation, she became a language teacher at a top primary school in Shanghai, quickly earning recognition for her diligence and responsibility. Ling also loved literature, especially classic Chinese works, and frequently shared her writings and reflections on WeChat. Her life, however, took a dark turn in 2012 when Xiaodong entered the picture at age 25. Ling met Xiaodong through a mutual friend, and they quickly discovered shared interests. She was immediately drawn to his handsome appearance, which reminded her of her idol, Miyavi, the Japanese guitarist and singer. By their second year of acquaintance, they began dating, though her parents were unaware of the relationship. At one point, Xiaodong suddenly disappeared, leaving Ling worried and confused. A year later, he reappeared, claiming he had been diagnosed with an untreatable brain tumor and had isolated himself in Tibet, surviving on snow melt and wild rabbits. Miraculously, the tumor later disappeared. Ling believed his story, feeling both sorrow and admiration for the challenges he had faced alone. Eventually, Ling revealed the relationship to her parents after a social media post from Xiaodong. At a wedding, inadvertently exposed their connection in the photo. Ling was holding Xiaodong's hand, smiling warmly. She assured her parents that he was a thoughtful and caring partner who often cooked for her, and colleagues had even noticed his attentive nature. Xiaodong's careful charm and apparent devotion helped him gain the trust of Ling's family from the outside. He seemed like the perfect partner, considerate, loving, and attentive. He frequently sent gifts, offered help with household chores, and presented himself as a responsible future husband. Ling, enchanted by his charm, grew increasingly devoted to him, often overlooking minor inconsistencies in his stories or behavior. However, the couple's relationship had hidden tensions. Ling's colleagues occasionally noticed that Xiaodong could be controlling and that Ling appeared anxious after certain interactions with him. She rarely spoke about these incidents, wanting to maintain harmony in her relationship. Friends also recalled that while Xiaodong seemed charming in public, he could be stern and demanding in private. The tragedy reached its climax on the evening of February 1, 2017, on a day that should have been filled with celebration. The once joyful family atmosphere was shattered. Investigators later discovered that Xiaodong had murdered Ling in their home. The extent of the crime shocked even seasoned police officers. Ling's body had been stored in the freezer, indicating premeditation and a cold, calculated attempt to conceal the crime. As authorities dug deeper, they uncovered that Xiaodong had a history of manipulative behavior. He had orchestrated much of his public persona to appear as an ideal partner, masking darker tendencies behind charm and apparent sincerity. Evidence suggested that he carefully planned the murder, taking advantage of Ling's trust and affection. The case revealed chilling details about Xiaodong's psychological manipulation. He had isolated Ling from close supervision, created an illusion of safety and love, and slowly introduced situations that left her vulnerable. Investigators concluded that the crime was not a spur-of-the-moment act but a calculated plan, likely driven by motives that would later come to light. In the Trillian's parents, devastated by the revelation, struggled to reconcile the image of the loving young man they had met with the reality of his actions. Their grief was compounded by guilt, questioning whether they had missed signs of danger and if they could have intervened. The murder of Ling in Hongkou district sent shockwaves through Shanghai, not only because of the brutality of the act, but also due to the deceptive nature of the perpetrator. It served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and even those closest to us may harbor dark intentions. Investigators, determined to bring justice, continued gathering evidence on Xiaodong's activities, communications, and possible motives, setting the stage for a trial that would reveal the full scope of the calculated and chilling crime that had destroyed Ling's life. Xiaodong, despite his modest earnings, maintained a lifestyle far beyond his means. He worked at a foreign department store earning just 1,800 yuan per month, approximately $250. Yet he frequently socialized at bars and spent lavishly. His sharp looks and well-groomed appearance made him popular among women, and he began to see his charm and attractiveness as a way to advance socially and financially. To keep up appearances, he borrowed money and maxed out credit cards to purchase expensive clothes, accessories, and jewelry. Even though Xiaodong's outward charm and polished image impressed neighbors and colleagues, his financial instability and indulgent habits revealed deeper issues. He relied on superficial means, his looks, charm, and borrowed funds to maintain a facade of success. Friends and acquaintances often viewed him as polite and soft-spoken, yet beneath the surface, his lifestyle depended on deception and overspending. Xiaodong, his obsession with appearances and material possessions, also influenced his relationship with Ling. While she was hardworking and responsible, he leveraged his charm to keep her infatuated, subtly controlling her while concealing his financial instability. This reliance on manipulation and appearances would later play a critical role in the tragic events that unfolded, ultimately leading to the horrifying death of his young wife. After his brief fame and his inability to maintain a steady income, Xiaodong became increasingly frustrated with his life. His charm and good looks had initially opened doors socially, but financially and emotionally, he was struggling. By the time he married Ling in 2015, he had already developed a habit of using deception and manipulation to maintain control in relationships following the marriage. Xiaodong's controlling tendencies began to manifest more clearly while Ling focused on her teaching career and managing household responsibilities. Xiaodong spent his time indulging in his hobbies, social outings, and personal interests, paying little attention to her emotional needs. Small disagreements and arguments began to surface, particularly around money and lifestyle choices. The trip to Hong Kong in October 2016 marked a turning point. Ling's dissatisfaction over the hotel arrangements sparked a confrontation between them. Xiaodong, unable to tolerate criticism and feeling cornered by what he perceived as a challenge to his authority, reacted violently on October 18, 2016. During one such argument at home, he grabbed Ling by the neck in a moment of rage, inadvertently suffocating her. The immediate aftermath of the incident, panic overtook Xiaodong. Realizing what he had done, he did not call for help or report the death. Instead, he chose to hide the crime for the next 3 months. He went to great lengths to maintain the illusion that Ling was alive. He continued to send messages from her phone via WeChat, carefully crafting texts to reassure her parents that she was merely busy or traveling during this time. He even staged interactions and minor events that implied her presence, delaying suspicion. Xiaodong's deception unraveled only when he confessed to his parents on February 1, 2017, coinciding with Mr. Gainan's 60th birthday. By then, the horrifying reality had to be faced. Ling had been dead for months, and her body had been concealed in the freezer. His parents, shocked and distressed, advised him to turn himself in immediately, which he did. The investigation revealed not only the act itself, but also the meticulous efforts Xiao Dong undertook to manipulate those around him and cover up his crime. Forensic analysis, combined with his confession, confirmed the timeline and the deliberate concealment of Ling's death. The case highlighted a chilling combination of impulsive violence, premeditated deception, and psychological manipulation, underscoring how appearances can mask deadly intentions. After Xiaodong's confession and his surrender to authorities, the police began a meticulous investigation into the events surrounding Ling's death. The discovery of her body in the freezer confirmed that the murder had occurred 3 months prior, and forensic examination corroborated Xiaodong's account. Ling had died from asphyxiation, consistent with being grabbed by the neck. The timeline of her death, coupled with evidence of manipulation through WeChat messages, painted a chilling picture of deliberate concealment. Authorities also investigated Xiaodong's behavior during the 3 months following the murder. They found that he had maintained the pretense that Ling was alive, sending messages to her family, colleagues, and friends, creating a false narrative of normalcy. CCTV footage from nearby streets and his apartment complex further confirmed that Ling had not left the residence after the date of her death. Psychological experts brought in by the court examined Xiaodong, noting a pattern of narcissistic tendencies and a propensity for manipulation. His charm, good looks, and ability to deceive others had allowed him to maintain control over the situation and delay suspicion. The experts concluded that the killing was not entirely impulsive. It was a combination of frustration, poor impulse control, and a willingness to cover up his actions to protect himself. The case quickly attracted widespread media attention across Shanghai and nationally. Headlines described the perfect couple turned tragedy, highlighting how Xiaodong had managed to maintain the illusion of normalcy while harboring a horrifying secret. Public reaction was one of shock and disbelief, especially given Ling's reputation as a gentle, accomplished teacher and Xiaodong's image as a charming, harmless husband. In court, prosecutors argued that Xiaodong's actions were both intentional and criminally negligent in their concealment. The 3-month period of deceit showed calculated behavior, designed to avoid detection. Defense attorneys attempted to argue that the suffocation was accidental and that Xiaodong had acted out of a sudden emotional outburst. But the evidence of concealment and deception weakened this defense. In August 15, 2017, the Shanghai Intermediate People's Court delivered its verdict. Xiaodong was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. In addition, he received further penalties for obstructing justice and tampering with evidence, including imprisonment for the 3 months following the murder and fines related to delaying reporting the crime. The verdict brought a measure of closure to Ling's grieving family, though the trauma of the prolonged concealment and betrayal remained profound. Ling's parents and colleagues spoke publicly about the importance of vigilance in relationships, warning others not to be blinded by charm and appearances. The Xiaodong case remains a stark reminder of how domestic environments can hide dark and violent realities, and it continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of manipulation, secrecy, and unchecked impulse in personal relationships. Following the trial, the societal reaction to the Xiaodong case was intense, and widespread media outlets across China scrutinized every detail of the case, framing it as a cautionary tale about domestic deception, obsession, and the hidden dangers behind seemingly perfect couples. Online forums and social media platforms erupted with commentary, with many expressing shock at how a charming, handsome man could orchestrate such a prolonged cover-up while maintaining a facade of normal. Ling's colleagues at the primary school shared heartfelt memories of her professionalism, kindness, and dedication to her students. Many expressed sorrow not only for her death but also for the betrayal by someone she trusted completely, her students. who had known her as a patient and nurturing teacher, were profoundly affected, and the school organized memorials to honor her memory. Her writing and reflections shared on WeChat became a poignant reminder of her gentle personality and love for literature, further fueling public grief. Psychologists and criminologists weighed in on Shodong's behavior, noting several alarming traits. Experts highlighted his narcissism, and ability to maintain a double life. They explained that his charm and good looks had allowed him to disarm those around him, and his prolonged deception demonstrated a calculated, controlling mindset. Some specialists suggested that his earlier history of delinquency, indulgence in gambling and partying, and early exposure to familial instability may have contributed to his inability to handle stress or accountability in a healthy way. Liang's parents became outspoken advocates for awareness around domestic abuse and early warning signs of manipulation in relationships. They emphasized the importance of communication, trust, and vigilance, particularly for young couples who might be swept away by charm and material gestures. Community groups in Shanghai even organized seminars on relationship safety and recognizing, controlling, or abusive behaviors legally. The Shodong case prompted discussions about the effectiveness of surveillance, digital communication tracking, and domestic monitoring. The police highlighted how the analysis of WeChat messages, CCTV footage, and consistent forensic investigation were crucial in uncovering the truth. Authorities used the case as an example in training programs for law enforcement to detect long-term concealment of domestic crimes. The psychological aftermath for himself was complex. While his death sentence was upheld, court-appointed psychiatrists documented a sense of detachment from reality and minimal remorse beyond fear of legal consequences. This further confirmed the chilling nature of his actions. Not only had he taken a life, but he had also spent months manipulating the narrative to protect himself, all while keeping others in the dark. Over time, Liang's story became a reference point in discussions about domestic safety, highlighting how appearances can be deceiving and how critical it is to take sudden disappearances or unusual behaviors seriously. Her legacy as a kind and diligent teacher continued to inspire both her students and her community, reminding the public that vigilance and awareness can sometimes prevent tragedy, even if it cannot undo past events. Shodong continued to carefully construct the illusion of normalcy in the aftermath of his crime. Following the murder, he wrapped Liang's body in a large blanket and concealed it in the freezer on the balcony, ensuring that the immediate evidence of the crime was hidden. He meticulously cleaned the apartment, removing any traces of the struggle, and even disposed of the bedding to eliminate physical evidence. Meanwhile, Shodong exploited Liang's finances for his own gain. He transferred 45,000 yuan from her Alipay account into his own and used her credit cards to make purchases exceeding 100,000 yuan to anyone observing from the outside. He maintained the appearance of his usual routine, concealing the fact that he had committed murder and was living with the corpse of his wife. During the 3 months that followed, Shodong carefully managed interactions with Liang's family, communicating through WeChat as if she were still alive. He crafted messages that suggested she was simply busy or dealing with personal matters, creating a facade that delayed suspicion. Only on February 1, 2017, did he finally confess the crime to his parents, revealing the truth about Liang's death and pointing out the location of her body in the freezer. Shodong's premeditation: buying forensic and death-related books, ordering a freezer, installing a security camera, and manipulating both his wife and her finances, highlighted a chilling combination of control, deception, and calculated intent. Authorities later described his actions as a meticulously planned crime that exploited trust, love, and financial resources for personal gain, making it one of the most notorious domestic murder cases in Shanghai. After Shodong's confession, the police immediately launched a full-scale investigation. Officers returned to his apartment to collect evidence, discovering the freezer on the balcony and confirming the presence of Liang's body. Forensic analysis corroborated Shodong's confession, showing that Liang had died from asphyxiation due to strangulation. The blanket and bedding, which had been meticulously cleaned, still contained trace evidence linking Shedong to the crime. Investigators also reviewed his financial activity during the 3 months following the murder, the transfers from Liang's Alipay account, and charges on her credit cards painted a clear picture of his exploitation of her assets. Digital forensics showed that Shedong had maintained communication with Liang's family under her identity, further highlighting the calculated nature of his actions. During questioning, Shedong admitted to the premeditation, explaining that he had bought books on forensic anatomy and philosophy of death, ordered the freezer, and even installed a security camera to monitor the balcony. Police concluded that his behavior after the murder, covering up the crime, manipulating his wife's finances, and deceiving her family, demonstrated clear intent and deliberate planning. Rather than an impulsive act of rage, the case quickly attracted widespread media attention, shocking the public due to its cold, methodical execution and the prolonged deception of the victim's family. Liang's parents expressed devastation but relief that the truth had finally come to light. The Shanghai court formally tried Shedong for murder and financial fraud. Prosecutors emphasized the premeditation, the exploitation of Liang's financial resources, and the psychological manipulation of her family, arguing that his actions were deliberate and calculated. Shedong's defense, on the other hand, claimed that the killing had been accidental, citing the argument that preceded the strangulation. After reviewing all evidence including forensic reports, financial records, security footage, and Shedong's own detailed confession, the court ruled that the murder was premeditated and intentional. Shedong was sentenced to death, reflecting the severity of his crime, and was also fined for the financial exploitation of his wife's accounts. The verdict was widely accepted and praised by the public, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of domestic violence, manipulation, and the importance of thorough police investigation in cases of sudden disappearances. Following Shedong's conviction, authorities took steps to ensure justice for Liang while also examining the systemic red flags that might have prevented such a tragedy. The case highlighted multiple warning signs: his long history of deception and criminal behavior, controlling tendencies within the marriage, and the sudden, unexplained disappearance of the victim. Investigators noted that Liang's trust in her husband and her desire to protect her parents had inadvertently allowed Shedong to manipulate circumstances to his advantage. The public and media response was intense. Citizens expressed outrage, not only at the brutality of the crime, but also at the cold, calculated planning that went into both the murder and the cover-up. Psychologists and criminologists analyzing the case remarked on the pattern of premeditated domestic crimes driven by financial gain or personal control, emphasizing that these behaviors often escalate over time, sometimes under the radar of family, friends, and co-workers. Liang's parents, though devastated by their loss, became vocal advocates for awareness of domestic abuse, coercive control, and financial exploitation within marriages. They urged families to maintain close communication and for authorities to take early reports of unusual behavior seriously, even when the victim appears content or reluctant to speak out. In a broader context, this case, alongside the Leng Fengxin case from 2013, painted a grim picture of how personal relationships can be exploited for monetary gain, showing the extreme lengths individuals may go to in order to obtain wealth or cover debts. Both cases involved meticulous planning, manipulation of victims, trust, and deliberate staging to disguise the murders as accidents, highlighting a recurring theme: when financial desperation and selfish ambition intersect with intimate relationships, the outcomes can be tragically fatal. Law enforcement agencies used these cases as lessons to improve investigative techniques, particularly in detecting staged accidents, monitoring suspicious financial activity, and questioning accounts that seem overly convenient or inconsistent. These improvements were seen as critical in preventing similar crimes and in protecting potential victims. Before tragedy could strike ultimately, while justice was served in both cases, the chilling realities they revealed continue to serve as cautionary tales, reminding the public that outward appearances of love or normalcy can sometimes conceal a darker, calculated truth if you want. I can now create a concise timeline comparing the Leng Feng-Xin case and the Xie Dongling case, showing parallels in planning, manipulation, and the eventual unraveling of their schemes. This could help tie the narrative together neatly. Addition: Xie Dong had taken out loans in Liang's name, borrowing over 200,000 yuan altogether. He had accumulated more than 500,000 yuan, roughly $70,000, a considerable sum at the time in China, but Xie Dong's manipulation didn't end there. He repeatedly used his deceased wife's ID to rent hotel rooms with other women and indulged in shopping sprees and lavish trips with the money he had stolen. Meanwhile, he continued using Liang's WeChat account to communicate with her friends and frequently updated her status, responding to calls or voice messages by claiming her phone was broken and that she could only text the night before he turned himself in. Xie Dong spent hours playing the game Honor of Kings from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., only leaving once to dispose of Liang's phone and ID in a river before returning to continue playing the following morning, which coincided with his father-in-law's 60th birthday. Xie Dong realized he could no longer conceal the truth upon hearing of their daughter's murder. Liang's parents were devastated and outraged. They refused to accept any apologies or compensation from Xie Dong's family. Xie Dong's mother, devastated yet convinced the killing had been accidental, hired a lawyer for her son. Xie Dong maintained that he had unintentionally strangled Liang, claiming that when she stopped moving, he panicked and froze for 3 hours, rather than calling for help. His behavior after the crime, however, stealing her assets, living extravagantly, and continuing to impersonate her online directly, contradicted his account of remorse. A year later, Xie Dong's trial began at the Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court. He admitted to concealing Liang's body but refused to acknowledge intentional murder. He claimed that the freezer he purchased was for storing mice, as he kept snakes and lizards, and insisted that the forensic and death philosophy books were hers, not his. Investigators disproved this, showing the books had been delivered to his father's house and brought to his apartment, suggesting he had hidden them from Liang. Moreover, his crime mirrored the methods described in the books. The prosecution argued that Xie Dong's actions were clearly premeditated, pointing out that he only confessed after pressure from his parents on the day of his father-in-law's birthday, suggesting he would have otherwise continued hiding the crime. The court concluded there was no justification to reduce his sentence. Ultimately, the Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court sentenced Xie Dong to death for intentional homicide and embezzlement of his wife's assets. His family appealed, but the Shanghai Higher People's Court upheld the original sentence. During the appellate hearing, a judge noted that on the morning of the murder, Xie Dong had booked a flight to Seoul, arranged to meet friends, and went out partying. A lack of panic and a calculated approach to his post-crime activities. In June 2020, Xie Dong was executed, more than 1,300 days after his confession. The tragedy of Liang's life and death served as a stark reminder never to judge someone solely by outward appearances. The next case unfolded in Adelaide, approximately 680 miles from Sydney, on December 31, 2014. A 25-year-old Chinese woman named Fong Ting, nicknamed Honey, was staying at a 4-star hotel. Working a night shift, Fong was a high-end tour guide based in Sydney, though her role focused on catering to wealthy clients during luxury tours. On New Year's Eve, dressed in a light-colored dress with her hair flowing, Fong seemed calm and composed, unaware that she was walking toward her death. Tour guides like Fong rarely worked in the same cities consecutively. Fearing encounters with former clients this time, she planned to work in Adelaide for a few days, intending to return to Sydney with her remaining commission, after deducting intermediary fees over the previous year and a half. She had visited Adelaide 8 times without incident at around 7 a.m. on January 1, 2015. A Chinese man named Mr. Shin arrived at the hotel, acting as Fong's driver and intermediary. Shin coordinated her movements and logistics employed by the travel company Sweet Baby. He ensured women like Fong traveled safely, met clients, and were supplied with essentials after parking. Shin tried to call Fong, but received no response, worried she might have overslept. He used a key card to enter her hotel room on the 12th floor. He heard running water from the bathroom and assumed she was showering or with a client, feeling awkward. He left and returned to the lobby, attempting to call her again without success. Even contacting the front desk yielded no response. Shin began to worry, not immediately about her safety, but suspecting she might have left without settling intermediary fees concerned. He returned to her room to check again when Shin returned to Fong Ting's hotel room. He found the door slightly ajar. Stepping inside cautiously, he immediately noticed something was wrong. The room was in disarray, with signs that a struggle may have occurred. Fong was nowhere to be seen, and her belongings, handbag, phone, and wallet, were scattered across the floor. Alarmed, Shin quickly contacted hotel security and called the local police. The Adelaide police arrived promptly and began a preliminary investigation. They reviewed hotel surveillance footage, which revealed that Fong had returned to the room alone the previous evening after finishing her work shift. No one else appeared to enter or leave her room late that night. Her disappearance, combined with the state of the room, raised immediate concerns of foul play. Investigators interviewed hotel staff and nearby guests, but initially received little helpful information. Fong's client appointments were checked, and her social media accounts were analyzed to identify potential contacts who could provide clues. Authorities discovered that she had been corresponding with several high-profile clients through messaging apps, but none seemed to have a motive to harm her. Attention soon turned to her travel arrangements. Fong had been moving between cities for her work, and her schedule suggested she might have been targeted while alone in unfamiliar surroundings. Police contacted Sweet Baby, the travel company, and Fong's colleagues. Learning more about her routines and client interactions, they discovered that while Fong's work appeared glamorous, it also made her vulnerable. She frequently met wealthy, sometimes secretive clients without oversight, putting her at risk. Shin, as her handler, provided crucial details about Fong's habits, clients, and itinerary. He revealed that Fong had been planning to return to Sydney that day, carrying both cash and the remainder of her commission from the Adelaide tours. Police now suspected that her disappearance was linked not to random crime, but to someone aware of her occupation and movements, someone possibly close enough to know her schedules. The investigation progressed. Police expanded their search to include hotels she had visited previously, rental cars she may have used, and even taxi services in Adelaide. They also reviewed bank transactions, seeking evidence of forced withdrawals or unusual activity within days. Forensic teams had canvassed the area around the hotel and nearby public spaces. Though initially no trace of Fong Ting could be found, the case quickly attracted public attention. Both in Adelaide and Sydney media reports highlighted her work as a high-end tour guide, catering to wealthy clients, sparking concern over the safety of women in similar professions. Fong's family in Sydney became increasingly anxious, contacting the Australian and Chinese authorities for updates. As police pieced together the evidence, they discovered subtle clues suggesting the involvement of someone within her professional circle. Emails, messages, and contact records pointed toward a potential insider, someone who knew her routine, her clients, and possibly had access to the hotel where she disappeared. This led investigators to focus on individuals who had previously accompanied Fong on her tours or managed her bookings. Each lead was meticulously checked, and patterns of communication were analyzed to determine if anyone might have had both motive and opportunitas. The timeline of events combined with Fong's messages and the hotel surveillance, pointed directly toward him as the last person to see her alive. Investigators noted that Ba Zhongwang had booked Fong for an extended period, but left abruptly around 12:34 a.m., far earlier than expected, which contradicted the arrangement they had agreed upon. This sudden departure raised serious suspicions, as it suggested he may have committed the crime and then fled before being discovered. Police began tracing Ba's movements. After leaving the hotel, they reviewed taxi, rideshare, and public transport records to determine where he had gone, while also contacting banks and mobile networks to see if he had made any unusual transactions or calls at the same time. Forensic teams examined the crime scene in detail. Fingerprints and DNA samples were collected from the knife, the blood-stained blanket, and other surfaces, including the bathtub and mattress, which could confirm the perpetrator's presence. Authorities also scrutinized Ba's background, despite having no prior criminal record. Police discovered that he had traveled extensively and had several connections in the hospitality and service industries. Investigators considered whether he might have been aware of Fong's vulnerable work situation and financial assets, making robbery a potential motive. Additionally, they looked into whether the unusual crescent-shaped wounds on Fong's head might indicate a particular technique or weapon he had used in past incidents. The financial aspect of the case became increasingly relevant. Fong had earned around OD 8,000 over the preceding days, but only AOD 4,000 remained in her hotel drawer. This discrepancy suggested that the killer may have targeted her for monetary gain, taking the missing funds along with her phone and ID. To cover his tracks, police believed BAA might have taken advantage of this situation, using the opportunity of the late-night arrangement to commit the murder while ensuring no witnesses were present. Interviews with Mr. Shin and Mr. Chin confirmed that they had last communicated with Fong late in the evening, with no indication of trouble. Their statements, combined with the hotel's surveillance footage, established a clear sequence. Fong was alone in the room when Ba arrived. He left early in the morning, and no one else entered until the discovery. With mounting evidence, Australian authorities issued a warrant for Ba Zhongwang's arrest. They also began coordinating with Chinese authorities to track his potential movements back to his home country or other regions where he might attempt to flee. The investigation aimed not only to capture him, but also to gather enough forensic and testimonial evidence to secure a conviction. At this point, Ba was clearly the prime suspect, with motive, opportunity, and a suspicious departure, all pointing to him. Police now focused on reconstructing the night's events in detail, establishing how Fong had been killed, and confirming his involvement through forensic evidence and digital footprints. After issuing the warrant, authorities launched a coordinated manhunt for Ba Zhongwang. Investigators tracked his movements through his mobile phone and bank records, which revealed that he had fled Adelaide soon after the murder. He had initially returned to Sydney and was attempting to make arrangements for an overseas flight, likely intending to evade law enforcement. Police immediately alerted airport security and border control to prevent him from leaving the country within 2 days. Ba was located at a relative's apartment in Western Sydney when officers approached him. He initially appeared calm, but quickly became evasive. When questioned about Fong Ting, police placed him under arrest and transported him to a secure interrogation facility. During questioning, Ba maintained a composed demeanor, denying any involvement in Fong's murder. He claimed that he had left the hotel room earlier because he felt uncomfortable, and that he had no knowledge of what happened to her. Afterward, investigators, however, had gathered overwhelming evidence contradicting his story. Surveillance footage confirmed that he was the last person seen entering and leaving Fong's room. The timing of his departure did not match the agreed overnight arrangement, and the missing money and valuables suggested a financial motive. Forensic analysis of the Ra's blade and blood samples further strengthened the case. Ba's fingerprints were found on the knife, and traces of his DNA were discovered on the blanket covering Fong's body. Under continued questioning, Ba's story began to unravel. Detectives presented him with the evidence of his digital communication with Fong and his financial transactions that coincided with her murder. Faced with undeniable proof, he eventually confessed, stating that a confrontation had escalated after he demanded the extra payment, and in a moment of panic, he struck Fong multiple times. The fatal knife wound was inflicted when she tried to defend herself. The confession, combined with the forensic evidence and eyewitness accounts, allowed authorities to formally charge Ba Zhongwang with murder, robbery, and other related offenses. He was held in custody pending trial, where the prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditation, financial motive, and extreme violence. The defense argued that the murder had been unplanned, an impulsive act, and attempted to mitigate the charges during the trial. The court examined the meticulous timeline reconstructed from hotel surveillance, Fong's messages, and the testimonies of Mr. Shin and Mr. Chin. The jury was presented with the brutality of the crime scene, including the multiple head injuries, the severe knife wound to the neck, and the evidence of financial theft. Ba's attempt to leave the scene undetected, and his initial denial of involvement demonstrated consciousness of guilt. After several weeks of deliberation, the court found Ba Zhongwang guilty of murder and related charges. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the premeditated nature of the crime and the extreme violence inflicted on Fong Ting. Authorities emphasized that this case highlighted the dangers faced by vulnerable workers in high-risk industries and the importance of digital and forensic evidence in solving modern crimes. The tragic story of Fong Ting became widely reported in both Australia and China, serving as a warning about personal safety, trust, and the perils of financial exploitation. Her family and friends mourned her loss, but took some solace in the fact that justice had been served at 11 p.m. on January 1st. Police arrived at Ba Zhongwang's residence in the Adelaide suburbs. He lived there with his wife and their 8-month-old son, despite the holiday season. The family was already asleep when officers arrived. Given the severity of the crime, the police acted with urgency to locate the perpetrator. During the next 2.5 hours of searching and questioning, Ba remained unusually calm. His demeanor stayed relaxed and almost carefree, whether intentionally or not. Notably, his wife never entered the interrogation room. Ba admitted to meeting Fong that day, but insisted he was not her last client. According to him, Fong had mentioned that she still had 2 more clients to see, so he claimed he left the hotel shortly after midnight. He added that he had no knowledge of what happened to Fong. Afterward, police became further suspicious because Ba's pants and shoes, seen in the hotel surveillance footage, were missing from his home. Additionally, all his phone communications with Fong had been deleted. Only $1,250 Australian dollars were found in his wallet and jeans. Although Ba appeared highly suspicious, there was still no definitive evidence linking him directly to Fong's murder. Investigators turned their attention to the autopsy for more concrete clues. At this stage, forensic experts were particularly puzzled by the crescent-shaped wound on Fong's head. Searches of the hotel room failed to reveal any object that could have caused such an injury. One possibility considered was an iron, as the shape of its head resembled the wound, but no fingerprints or blood were found on it. The case took a breakthrough when investigators discovered a fingerprint on the heel of Fong's left high-heeled shoe, which was also covered in blood. Based on the fingerprint's position, police theorized that the killer had used the heel to strike Fong. The forensic doctor confirmed that the crescent-shaped wound matched the heel's shape. Authorities compared the fingerprint against the national database but found no matches. Ba Zhongwang was then summoned to the police station for fingerprinting. The results confirmed the match. Ba's right thumb print perfectly corresponded to the one found on Fong's high heel. During intense questioning, Ba remained calm and claimed, "I took Fong's shoes off that night, so it's normal for my fingerprints to be there." The police found this explanation as the fingerprint's position suggested. It would be highly unusual for someone to remove the left shoe in that manner. Under normal circumstances, after a lengthy interrogation, Police formally arrested Ba around noon on murder charges and read him his rights, unlike his previous cooperative behavior. Ba then refused to answer further questions, insisting, "I didn't kill anyone," although Ba was now in custody. The investigation was far from complete. Police continued gathering evidence to build a solid case. They learned that Ba had arrived in Australia in 2010 and married a local woman, but he was on a bridging visa rather than permanent residency. He operated a cleaning business that employed mostly Chinese students, while profitable on the surface. Ba was known to be a gambling addict who frequently borrowed money to manage debts. Investigators also discovered that shortly before meeting Fong, Ba had pawned his white Volkswagen for $8,000 odd inside the vehicle. Police found a sealed bag containing 18 razor blades in the driver's door compartment, blades identical to the ones recovered at the crime scene. A receipt dated December 5th showed he had made a payment to a local cleaning company. More alarmingly, just before meeting Fong, Ba had lost all his money at a casino, despite having no funds. He agreed to pay Fong $600 OD above the standard overnight rate. This raised serious questions. How did he plan to pay her? And why was he carrying razor blades at the time? Investigators speculated that BAA may have been pushed to his limits, targeting high-income sex workers whose earnings he knew about. In fact, a week before Fong's murder, he had met another woman at the Minister Hotel. After receiving the threatening message, investigators believed that Ba Zhongwang may have acted under extreme pressure, which could have contributed to the violent escalation that led to Fong's death. The timeline of events, however, suggested premeditation rather than a spontaneous reaction. Surveillance footage, phone records, and witness statements all painted a picture of a man who was aware of the financial and personal stakes involved. That night, forensic analysis further strengthened the case against BA. Blood samples found on Fong's clothing and the crime scene matched her DNA exclusively, while traces of Ba's fingerprints were discovered on multiple objects, including the razor blade packaging and several surfaces near the bathtub. The positioning of the wounds, combined with evidence of a struggle, moved furniture, displaced bedding, and blood spatter patterns, indicated that the attack was deliberate and methodical. Investigators also reviewed Ba's prior interactions with Fong. Text messages from the night before revealed that Ba had been unusually insistent about staying overnight, despite claiming he had no money. This inconsistency, combined with his sudden departure from the hotel before his expected payment period ended, suggested that he may have lured Fong into a vulnerable situation. Police questioned other hotel staff and clients who had seen Ba and Fong that night. Several witnesses corroborated the timeline that Ba had entered the room around 10 p.m. and left abruptly after midnight. No one else was seen entering the room, confirming that Ba had the opportunity to commit the crime without interference. Financial motives became increasingly clear. Fong had earned substantial money from her services over the preceding days, yet only part of it was recovered at the crime scene. Investigators concluded that Ba had a financial incentive to eliminate her and seize her earnings. Coupled with his gambling debts and history of borrowing money, this painted a picture of a man desperate enough to commit murder for personal gain. By piecing together forensic evidence, digital records, and witness accounts, authorities built a strong case linking BA directly to Fong Ting's murder. Despite his calm demeanor and initial denials, the evidence suggested a calculated and brutal attack, not a spontaneous act of violence. The investigation would later focus on reconstructing the crime in detail, including the exact sequence of injuries inflicted on Fong, how Ba manipulated the environment to cover up his actions, and how he attempted to obscure his financial motives. This meticulous work by the Adelaide police ultimately provided a comprehensive picture of the events leading up to Fong's tragic death and formed the basis for charges that would follow the following day. Police discovered that all of Ba Zhongwang's bank accounts were either empty or frozen. When pieced together with the fact that half of Fong's earnings were missing, The $1,250 in cash found on BA, and his recent $1,000 ATM deposit, a clearer picture began to emerge. Investigators also learned that Fong had recently purchased a new iPhone, which was missing after the attack. Ba's phone search history contained terms like how to unlock an iPhone without a password. Raising further suspicion, hotel surveillance footage from 12:34 a.m., just after Ba left the room, showed him lingering in nearby streets before returning to his car, suggesting he was trying to compose himself after a tense encounter. Police theorized that Ba may have promised to withdraw money from an ATM to pay for the overnight stay. Fong, perhaps not trusting him, may have insisted on accompanying him in a desperate move. Ba reportedly bent down as if putting on his shoes, grabbed one of her high heels, and attacked her. The razor blade was then used to inflict further injuries, catching Fong off guard. Another theory suggested he might have attacked her as she re-entered the room. While the investigation continued, Fong's parents and brother arrived in Australia from China on January 12, 2015. Unaware of her work as a high-end tour guide, Fong, who had left home at 17 to study physiotherapy at the University of Sydney, had supported herself through part-time jobs in supermarkets, restaurants, and salons before transitioning to her higher-paying role in the travel industry. Her parents, a taxi driver, father and factory-working mother, had sent her a monthly allowance, and Fong's career appeared to be progressing well until this tragic event enabled to afford a funeral. Fong's family received support from the local Chinese community, which organized a fundraising event to cover the costs. The case captured public attention, and anticipation grew for the moment the perpetrator would face justice. Finally, on August 17, 2016, the Adelaide Supreme Court opened the trial. BA consistently denied all charges, claiming there was no direct evidence linking him to the murder, and arguing that police reliance on Fong's phone data was insufficient. However, few supported his defense, including his own wife. The prosecution presented compelling evidence: surveillance footage showing Ba as the last person with the victim, the fingerprint on Fong's high heel used as the murder weapon, the razor blades matching those found in his possession, and the unexplained cash and clear financial motive. In the end, the judge sentenced Ba Zhongwang to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for intentional murder. Some observers felt the sentence was lenient, suggesting that had the trial taken place in China, Ba might have faced the death penalty or life imprisonment. Nonetheless, this verdict offered a measure of justice for Fong. Tinger's story also raises lingering questions. Why did a bright, promising graduate like Fong choose this line of work? Was it purely for financial gain, or were there other pressures that influenced her decision? Ultimately, it was her earnings that drew the attention of a dangerous predator, leading to her tragic death as the rain gently falls and the night deepens. Thank you for joining me here at Crime Whispers. True crime stories remind us of life's hidden dangers and the importance of vigilance, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.